How you doing? And welcome to Unveiling Reality. How's everybody doing this evening? All right, man. All right, we got a interesting show for you tonight for sure. We're gonna dive into the world of aliens, ancient aliens. Imagine that, like all the way back in time. So a lot of people are under the impression that aliens may have been here a long time ago, helping do things like build stone statues and such. But maybe even influencing the gene pool. You never know. You never know. However, um, we are going to take a look at some deep analysis on a program that was on the History Channel called Ancient Aliens that promoted this idea, at least kind of put it out there, right? So, oh man, I'm missing something tonight. What am I missing? Oh, I'm missing my friends from overseas. I don't know why I guess they just magically stopped. That's amazing. Anyways, yeah, we have that going on, and we may have some guests joining us at some point, which will be a lot of fun. I'm gonna walk us in a little bit and just say hey to the crowd here. How's everybody doing this evening? Hope everybody's doing well. Well, it's a new day for sure. And I really want to open up this tonight with a something that most people don't know. I think that this gets spread around a lot, right? And that is this idea, right? I think it's been spread a lot on in a particular place, but by a particular person. But a lot of people have this same concept that there's this thing out there where there's a TED talk where Bill Gates says he admits to he's going to poison everybody with vaccines, and that's how he's going to control the population. And this has been going on a long time. And not that I am a Bill Gates fan by any means. I'm not. I don't agree with the man on hardly anything, but I do agree with the truth. And the truth of the matter is that anybody who's done any real research into that finds that that was completely taken out of context. And anybody who spreads it is a disinformation spreader, right? That's what they do. They spread a disinformation. And one of those things is that he actually believes this. Like, this is his belief. He believes that third world countries, right? They the reason why there's they have so many children over there, and it's kind of getting, they have so many children is because of the healthcare that they get. And so a lot of their children die young, very young. And so his methodology for this, not that I agree with him in any way about anything, but it's like his approach to this is his vexes and his foods, right? So he wants to improve the survivability of young kids in that situation, and that he believes in that philosophy right there will reduce the population because they won't have as many children, right? They will stop having as many children in fear of losing those children. So it's really funny when I see people out here just prancing around, and repeating this lie over and over again. Now, the way that it started was someone clipped that way back in the Facebook days, and it got around and went viral. And conspiracy theorists, people who don't really do much research past their confirmation bias, they pick that up and they run with it, right? And then they get everybody scared of something, right? But the truth of the matter is that whole clip is taken out of context. Anybody who does any research on it can find this stuff out. I mean, it's not really that hard. So that one's been kind of like gnawing at me for a while, and I just wanted to go ahead and put that out there. That when you hear someone saying that and making a big to do out of it, they don't know what they're talking about. And the truth of the matter is that it's just his philosophy that better healthcare and stuff when you're young will keep people from having as many children because they won't fear that their children are going to die, right? And a lot of countries, especially third world countries, your children take care of you when you're old, right? And they got to be there to either work the farm or do whatever. It's very old school, like the old colonial days and whatnot. So just keep that in mind. Just going to throw that out there, a little debunking early on tonight. Okay, because it's going to be a real debunking kind of night. Moving on. I know that we may have some new people in the chat tonight. Hopefully, some of our new friends will stop by. But I want to get out the retrospective and talk about where did I put that thing? Here it is. Right there. All right. Now I want to talk about how it works, right? because this is a key thing. And I actually hope to have some guests on in the future where I can actually go through this board with them and kind of like take a look at it together and let them get an idea where I'm coming from. So we're going to take a quick look at that real quick. And a quick look at that real quick. Yeah, I like that. Say hi. Say hey. How's it going, chat? How you doing, man? All right. So this is the way that it works. Okay. We got this first veil we're all born into, right? And this is the stuff that we kind of start to turn away from as we get older. Let me get my thing right there. All right. And this is all the stuff that we know of, right? These are the things that we've covered here on the channel so far. And tonight we're gonna check off this one right here. So anyways, this is anything you would find if you are in the establishment narrative. So, you reject, you accept what you're seeing. You kind of think that this is the way the normal world works. And you're kind of just kind of saying, I'm fine. I'll take this information. I don't kind of go any further with it. I kind of believe what the government's telling me. At some level, the media is telling me. On some level, what I'm seeing in Hollywood is really entertainment, and so on. And then these things like political correctness and CRT and films, they're all good things, right? They're all good things to people in the first veil. And as we talk about, public schools are decent. Yeah, send your kids there. Things like that, right? Economics are fine. Yeah, there are no shenanigans in religion going on. Yeah, there's the climate thing. These things like that. These are all located in this first veil. Now, when you get awaken and you realize that you're being lied to by a lot of these entities, you start to lose that trust, right? And you start to move into this next world, which is what we call the second veil. And the second veil of information is like the alternative narrative to this, right? It's like, well, it's because of this or because of that. And within this veil, right, you'll see that a lot of people kind of end up in this veil, and that's where they kind of stay, right? They kind of know this stuff. These people don't know this stuff so much. They know maybe some of it exists, right? Like they can kind of but they usually joke about it and think that it's there's no truth to it. And the same thing here. These guys don't think there's any truth to what's going on over here, and they're more right than these guys. I can tell you that. But the problem is that you get in these conspiracy rabbit holes, and you never get out. And a lot of them are intentionally designed that way. Some of them are intentionally designed to pull people in a direction and cause optics or cause some kind of situation that diminishes the any real resistance or any real change from happening, right? By demonizing the people that are actually know this scam right here, but aren't sure what to do next, right? And so that's what we talk about is like, why is this here and why is this there? Well, it creates a cycle, right? A cycle of abuse, because when you lie, when you play games, when you're toxic, when you do things like that, that's abuse, right? And a lot of people don't realize it. They just think it's funny, or they think it's the way it is, or they actually physically get some kind of physical, psychological benefit from it, from causing harm to other people. Now, I'm going to tell you the best thing you can do when that happens. Hey, guys, let me take a break and say hi for a second. Hey, Rabbit, how you doing? Thank you for being here. Lady Autumn, how you doing? Katelyn, what's up? What's up? Hey, guys, Talking Trash and Tooth, thank you for being here. Yeah, so I'm talking about this right now, the cycle of abuse. And a lot of people that are here have heard this before, but we're doing a high-level review, and then we're going to get into ancient aliens. But what I found out through researching this stuff over the years and kind of fighting the disinformation that comes out of here, a lot of it's just half-baked. Some of it's a little bit more in detail. Definitely these tribalistic groups form out of them. And a lot of bad stuff. There's no real solutions here, right? They'll tell you about it. They'll scream at the top of their lungs, but they have nothing as far as solutions go. Now, we're about solution culture here, right? So we're trying to get past awareness, get past this stagnation that's going on between these two veils right here. And we're trying to see past it to understand why is it happening and what does it contribute to, and how can we find the root cause issues and remove the enablement for those mechanisms, right? So when you remove the enablement for something, right, it can no longer function. And so it's all about removing enablement from the cycle of abuse. And when we do that, we start to impact this cycle of control here. So that's what we're really getting at. And as you move past these, you realize that this cycle of control, and a lot of people that are in the second veil will tell you, hey, I know who's doing this stuff. They can't put their finger on it, or maybe they want to, blame one group or another group or another group or something like that, right? The truth is that they can keep these illusions going a long time, right? And they have been. And what these illusions do is keep us in a perpetual state of division, right? It's a form of generational warfare where you're constantly having one generation after another grow up believing these things. And if they don't buy into the establishment narrative, then there's this nice alternative narrative waiting for them right here, thanks to these nice little words like COINTELPRO and disinformation and so on. And so this causes destabilization and demoralization, which is two of the pillars of ideological subversion or psychological warfare. See, this all came about from my studies in mind control, which I've been doing for well over a decade and a half now, I believe. And so I was trying to find the answers, and I stumbled across them recently, this idea that there's this other thing driving it, this cycle of abuse that's going on. And we've seen some of that. We've covered some of that, like MK Ultra legacy, deep state intelligence agencies, the troubled teen industry with Mark Babbitt's and the Elon Survivor Group. And this is when people in the world come into crisis. See, the philosophy here is if you abuse the young, you break the future. Over here, subvert the young, change the culture. Over here, live in fear, stay on defense. That means, no solutions. You're just constantly fighting within this realm, and they can continually control us that way. It's division, right? Division, manufactured division. That's how the board works. And so what we're doing is we're going through all these ideas on our way to what we're building here, which is solution culture. Solution culture is about changing this cycle of abuse and erasing these veils. So what we want to do with solution culture is remove the enablement for these global ownership class types that do these big operations and control all the wealth and resources in our society, right? Generational corruption goes into control of reality. So they control our reality. And to win reality, we actually have to confront this and have an open mind about what we're looking at. And so that's what the show's about. It's about exploring these ideas. And like I said, this is an ongoing board. It's a living document, if you will, that we are constantly adding to. And these are the veils of perception. And these are the subversive elements in the veils of perception right here. That's a quick high-level view of this. And of course, in solution culture, we're trying to change the education to stop the subversive enablement. When we are able to do that generationally, by reforming our education system, getting control of our parental rights again, and introducing the right kind of education, like the trivium education, where we're using logic and reason to make decisions and discern information, where we're repairing our history by filling in the omitted facts and being real about how the world is. Oh, thank you, Rabbit. Thank you, Rabbit. Hey, what's up, TR? How you doing, brother? Good to see you, man. Good to see you. We are starting to put the omitted parts of history back in so we can have a realistic look at it. And we're going to learn through that, not only having people grow up with the right history in their mind, but also we're going to learn who the real bad guys are that have been omitting the facts, right? They've been omitting the facts so that they have control of the narrative, right? And where do they do that? Right here. Public schools, colleges, universities, establishment media, government politics, and these lobbyist activist groups that, and the entertainment industry helps them out too, right? So they come in and they solidify that. So that's what this is about, right? Solution culture. And as we've learned, when you look past that, there's these overlying bigger ideas that are out there that supersede our civilization and humankind as it is. These bigger things in the world that are like, enslavement versus free will, right? Because you're going to take two paths in life. You're either going to believe that this is a good thing or this is a good thing. And with that, we split it right down the middle. And we see that these people believe people are property. These people believe life equals rights and self-ownership and humanity and immersion, which is where we all work together without an authoritarian overlord, right? So that's what that's about. For anybody who's new to the channel and viewing this, I just want to kind of introduce you to this board. And of course, it goes out and we have more to go on this. But we look in, and the idea is like this. You start here. Oh, don't want to mess that up. You start here in life. There we go. Right. And you're born innocent, love, and light. And as you start to grow and mature, you're introduced to these first veil ideas. Now, some people stay here their whole life. They can see other things, but they're not necessarily going to move out of this veil and start to believe something like this or anything like that. Well, some people do. Some people are like, this is BS. I see the lies. I'm moving on. Well, what's waiting for them on the other side of this veil is all these other kind of conspiracies and ideas where people are trying to find the truth. They've lost faith in this system right here. And now they're trying to find out what's really going on. Well, believe me, the people who run this system over here on the in the fourth veil, they know very well that this is a phenomenon, that people do leave the first veil. And they have already set lots of nice little sticky traps for you right here in the second veil. So that's the general premise of it. I can go deeper. I go deeper into it, and I definitely open up people to come and speak to me about this if they like to discuss things like this. And we will have an after show in the Discord where people can come by and ask me questions about this and talk. Probably go about an hour and then or two, depending on how many people are interested in having a conversation about these ideas. That's what I really want to use Discord for, is to do that and to do watch along. We're gonna have a watch along channel, a gaming channel, and then just a general discussion channel. So people that want to watch a video together and do something like that can go into our watch along party room and not be disturbed. People who want to play a game together, they can go into the gaming room and not be disturbed. And people who want to talk and have a conversation, well, they can use the winner circle and we can all sit there and have a good conversation. So I hope you guys will make use of that. I think it's a good system. I think it's one of the better ones. And that certainly helps everybody enjoy their time when they decide to spend it together. And that's I'll see you guys hopefully after the show if you want to come by and say hi, and we can do that. So anyways, that's the high level of this kind of system that we're putting together here and we're looking at. And we'll go into more of this every week as we kind of start out. We'll kind of like hit on some topics. Tonight we're going to hit ancient aliens, right? I'm saving this topic right here and put this right here. It's a little bit before that. For a guest or two, actually. I'm talking to a couple people about doing a show with them on this that are very much into this topic. And then we're going to kind of take this topic and we're kind of going to move this way. We're going to go from the ancient aliens, which everybody can kind of watch on the History Channel, believe it or not. And we're going to move into this disclosure project, because if you haven't noticed, this is ramping up. This is ramping up. So we're going to be on top of it and be timely with the information, and start to really dive into these different groups. And we're going to walk on down the line to this Galactic Federation of Light. Now, we did jump ahead a little bit and talk about the Super Soldier program, which was very entertaining. But we can touch back on that because I have some more information on that and some more characters that are frequenting this space now. This is kind of the evolution, if you will. And we'll also talk about this Gaia thing. What is Gaia? What is that all about? And how impactful is it? And I think we'll eventually kind of move down into this area right here. So we're going to kind of go on this. We're going to go out. We're going to go to space, because space is the place, right? We're going to go out into space and we're going to talk about these things and have a lot of good upcoming episodes covering these topics. And I'm really excited about a lot of these, like talking about the Disclosure Project. I've been researching these things for over 10 years. I got a lot of information on it to share with you. All right, so let's put the board away. Any questions in the crowd, please shout them out, just to at me, and I'll respond to that. Let me make sure I haven't missed anything on this side. Okay, we're all good over here. All right, hey, and thank you, Rumble, for being here. Thank you. Welcome. Let's get you live over here. All right. So away we go. Let me go ahead and pull up our feature presentation for the evening. All right, there we go. Now this has been out for a while. This is a great reason why I picked this is because it is a great breakdown, very detailed, and it comes at it from a I think a very logical point of view. I'm going to be stopping, of course, and commenting as we go. But enjoy the show. We're going to be here for a while, and like I said, hopefully we'll have some guests stop by. Hey, Chris, how you doing, man? Have you described your overall picture? Hold on a second. Let me. I'm going to get this straight, and I'll answer your question. Chris asks, hey, Chris, have you described your overall picture? We're working towards that. The way that I've been doing it since I started the channel a year ago is I've been kind of walking the information in. And we started out with the kind of the elements of how the mind works, right? And then we kind of like built on that into how psychological warfare works in the mind. And then as we did that, I kind of like went on a little quest, if you will, and I learned a bunch of information about. I had to learn a bunch of information about how the YouTube world worked, and that information and really unveiled a lot of new information to me. And I met a lot of new people, and I got a lot of really, really deep introspects into things I would never seen before. However, it did connect the dots back to my activist days from the 2008 to 2015-ish kind of realm, right? And mainly big time in the the run up to the Ron Paul runs at president, and and a lot of the things, the activities I was doing back then, like fighting disinformation, trying to keep the Ron Paul supporters out of these rabbit holes so that we had legitimacy. The hardest part about that time is that we're coming out of a generational normalization of this false left-right paradigm that we were born into, believing that the parties didn't work together, believed that there was a difference between Democrats and Republicans on the surface, right? And and really just finding out that it was just a WWE match where these neocons had taken the right, the GOP, and they were playing the heel, but they were never changing any of the policies they promised to change. They were just creating new wars. And then the Democrats would come in and they would not change any of the policies they promised to change, and they would sustain the wars and if not create more. So this ongoing cycle of fake bipartisan or fake partisanship and a fake illusion of choice we were born into. People were very, very much comfortable with the idea of that setup, right? And so a guy like Ron Paul, who was extremely honest and wanted to bring back liberty, would have a difficult time. So the mission was to get people to realize the difference between that, and then to keep the credibility of this Ron Paul revolution. And of course, there was a lot of COINTELPRO and a lot of people out there that were trying to discredit that real, true resistance, that real, true choice, that real, true. I'm trying to think of the word. That real, true opposition. That's it. That's the word. Opposition. Like there wasn't any real opposition. We were just given the illusion that there was an opposition to it, but everything kept moving forward. Ron Paul changed all that. He woke a lot of people up to the philosophy of liberty again, which had been taken out of our schools. We didn't grow up learning. So that's what we're doing with that. So we learned all that stuff, and it's really been connecting the dots back to that whole time. And some of it has to do with understanding why, and this is my big thing, is like trying to understand how this disinformation in the second veil got there. Like who's producing it? Like where does it come from? Oh, do you do? See, I focus a lot of attention on how they separate generations through media. I love that, dude. I love that, man. That's awesome. I as well. That is a great point, man. And they really do. And I think you'll dig what we have going on here with the generational warfare, because it's always about the kids. They always go after the youngest generation. And it's like they got a plan way ahead of time, you know? So yeah, man. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm happy you found us. And let's make sure we talk, man. And do you have a channel? Do you have a channel? Let me know if you got a channel. We'll check it out and we'll try to get some subs for you tonight. All right. Let's go ahead and dive on into our featured presentation. Ancient Aliens Debunked. Here we go. Let me know if I need to adjust any sound or anything as well. By Chris White. I think he does a little disclaimer in front. And oh, you don't, Chris? Okay, cool. Well, hey man, just hang out and please add to it. And if you Discord, you can come Discord and ask me questions there. I'd love to talk with you about these things. Let's see, you said I focus a lot of attention, and just let me know whatever that project is you're doing or how you're doing that focusing. Let me know, man. I'd love to maybe add it to it. If you are an expert in some area, we can probably discuss maybe having you on or something like that. All right. Now I want to tell you that that Chris White comes at it. He is a Christian. He comes at it from a certain point of view, but I don't feel like this is really has anything much to do with that. If I remember it right, it doesn't have much to do with anything like that. He kind of says, yeah, I don't hide the fact that I am this person, right? And he's proud of who he is. He's not ashamed of it. But I can tell you that I don't think that it's I think that maybe his interest in it was this, but I don't think that it's a where it screws off into religion very much. But however, the fact that Ancient Aliens does bring religion up a lot, I think is why he had the interest in it. But we're going to look at it from a very open-minded point of view. And here we go.
Ancient Aliens is an American television series which premiered on April 20th, 2010 on the History Channel. The program presents the so-called ancient astronaut theory, which is the idea that extraterrestrials visited the Earth in the ancient past, and that historical texts, archaeological records, and various legends contain evidence of this contact. I used to believe that the ancient astronaut theory was true. I spent years learning about it from the popular authors, from video presentations and radio shows. I was an enthusiastic promoter of this idea to my friends and family. Although I no longer feel that way, I want you to know that I have no personal reasons to reject this theory. My current worldview could easily accommodate the existence of extraterrestrials. I hope you will come away from this film, even if you disagree with it, saying that I fairly reviewed the claims of ancient aliens without bias and with respect. I hope to show you that this is not a matter of ancient aliens getting a few details wrong here and there and their main premise remaining true. That is not an option in my opinion. I hope to demonstrate to you that they are wrong not on some, but on every single point where they assert an ancient astronaut theory to explain evidence, and that often they are using deceptive means to do this, and sometimes even fabricating evidence to make their points, as we will see. I would also like the viewer to know that unlike many skeptics of the ancient astronaut theory, I actually concede that something out of the ordinary could have occurred in the ancient past, and that there are certain consistent themes in ancient mythologies and the like that require good explanations. But I think you will quickly see that the ancient astronaut theories do not explain this evidence. You will notice a number that appears periodically on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen throughout this film. This number will appear when I am making a claim that requires a reference in order to back it up, and it will correspond to a number on the companion website ancientaliensdebunked.com. This film is divided into 3 main sections, and each topic can be viewed independently at the website if you choose. I will occasionally be joined by commentary from Dr. Michael Heiser, one of the few actual scholars who has been willing to interact with the ancient astronaut theory. Dr. Heiser has been one of the most articulate proponents of the skeptical viewpoint of this theory, and has written papers and books, as well as almost a dozen websites on the issues we will be covering in this film. We are happy to have him as a part of this film, and we're happy to have you, the viewer, here as well. I encourage you to have an open mind and enjoy the film.
Puma Punku is so unique in the way that it was constructed and shaped and positioned that it is the most intriguing ancient site on the planet.
While the pyramids at Giza are incredible features.
I just want to say I've been to these pyramids. I've been there. I've been inside that big one with the cap on it. I've been to all over Egypt. I've done the whole tour. What we did is we flew into Cairo, then we went to Giza, then we flew all the way down to the bottom of the Nile and took a boatel back up the Nile because the Nile flows north. And we stopped at all the sites along the way. I got a ton of stories about those. Some of them people have heard them. I'll maybe tell a few. But yeah, the one thing that strikes me, and that kind of I think gets past a lot of people is that if they, the aliens had to help us build these pyramids because how would they do it, right? Well, what would an alien race with the technology they had build a bunch of stone pyramids when they can just say, oh, here's steel, or here's some kind of space metal we have, right? Here's technology, here's everything. Okay, now you work for us. Why would they go through this trouble right here? I mean, we're not any different than we were back then, as biologically speaking. We haven't evolved past our form in these days. So that's the first thing that has always jumped out at me. Like, why would they come and build these kind of structures in this kind of place? If did they show up in a stone UFO or something? I don't get that part. So that was always one of the first red flags that popped up for me right here.
Of achievement. Compared to Puma Punku, the pyramids are child play.
In my opinion, the most significant piece of evidence that we have in this entire ancient astronaut puzzle is Puma Punku in the highland of Bolivia.
Well, if Puma Punku is considered such good evidence for the ancient astronaut theory, we should probably start off by looking at it. After all, it's the one that they say was built directly by extraterrestrials.
Puma Punku is the only site on planet Earth that, in my opinion, was built directly by extraterrestrials.
Ancient Alien starts off with a false dilemma by making people think that it was absolutely impossible for ancient people to construct Puma Punku, even to the point of making outright false claims.
One of the most intriguing things there is that the stones that were used there aren't sandstone, they're granite and diorite. The only
I love the
stone
music behind
that's
this.
harder than diorite
Dun.
is diamond. So the only way that this could have been achieved is if the tools were tipped with diamonds.
This is funny because it's totally wrong. The stones are not granite or diorite at Puma Punku. They are red sandstone and andesite. But this is also funny because of the way that he says it.
The stones that were used there aren't sandstone, they're granite and diorite.
Well, yeah, actually, it is sandstone. You can't blame him, though. It becomes obvious that throughout the series, he often just repeats things he's heard in Eric von Daniken's books. Von Daniken's books are what the Ancient Aliens series is based on. Later, we see Eric von Daniken himself make the exact same, totally wrong claim.
Of course made out of stones found on Earth, because you don't transport granite or diorite from another solar system.
Von Daniken continues building up this false dilemma.
One of these platforms is 800 tons.
This is very incorrect. The heaviest block at Puma Punku is 130 tons, and most of the stones are much smaller than that. So he's off by a whopping 670 tons.
Oh, yeah. That's
Unfortunately, we will come to expect this kind of thing from Von Daniken as we progress. Ancient Alien spends quite a lot of time pointing out the various features in the stonemasonry at Puma Punku, and then declaring it impossible to do without power tools.
Each of these small drill holes are basically evenly spaced along this routed groove. To me, it's clear that power tools have been used on this unusual block of stone here.
Well, exactly. This surface is as smooth as a tabletop, like in your kitchen. There's no wave to it or anything. This was machined.
The sandstone and andesite stones at Puma Punku would have been easily worked with the most basic stoneworking tools. The idea that diamond-tipped power saws were needed is ridiculous. The red sandstone was relatively soft and easy to work with, and even though andesite is pretty hard, because of the way it cooled, it could easily be flaked off using stones as soft as 5.5 on the Mohs scale. Such pounding stones were found all over the andesite quarries in the area. Contrary to Ancient Aliens' claims that archaeologists are baffled by Puma Punku, archaeologists know the basics about how Puma Punku's stones were cut and shaped. This is partly because there is evidence for this all over the site itself. They actually used a method that almost all ancient stoneworkers used. They used hard pounding stones to pound out trough-like depressions. Later on, they used flat stones and sand to grind the stone to make a polished surface. We will see later on that this is also how the Egyptians, thousands of years before this, made their flat-surfaced granite monuments like obelisks. Sand, as we will see later when we look at Egypt, has extremely hard particles in it, and if placed between a flat surface and a rock, can polish even the hardest stones known to man. In fact, the harder the stone is, the better it can be polished using sand. We will also see how sand can turn a piece of copper into a very efficient granite saw or granite drill, a method which the Egyptians utilized quite well. Some stones at Puma Punku that Ancient Aliens would never show the cameras are the ones that are in the middle of this process. They show that at the same time a stone was being pounded by stone hammers, which created these trough-like depressions, the grinding and polishing was taking place on the other end of the stone. Unfinished stones like this one clearly show how they were shaped, and it wasn't with lasers. There's also unmistakable evidence of stone hammers having been used in places that were never meant to be visible, like where certain stones would be connected with one another. And because of that, it's hard for me to believe Eric von Daniken in this next clip, because it would mean that the alien toolbox had a laser gun right next to a stone hammer.
Extraterrestrials arrive. The spaceship stands in orbit. Only a smaller space vehicle comes down like a space shuttle. So, just to protect their instruments, they make overnight, with their technology, what we call a base camp. Of course made out of stones found on Earth, because you don't transport granite or diorite from another solar system. And then they disappear. But the wall of their base camp is still there.
It is true that stone tools would not be enough to construct Puma Punku. especially for some of the finer points. For that, they would need metal chisels and the equivalent of a carpenter's square. Entire studies have been done detailing how these cuts were made, and nothing spectacular is required except some metal tools like chisels. The arguments against this are usually either that a particular culture did not yet know how to cast metals, or that copper chisels would have been too weak. On the first point, we know that the pre-Incan Andean culture was very skilled at fashioning metals and creating metal alloys. In fact, the people who built Pumapunku were even pouring copper alloys into molds right on site, showing that they had more than enough capability to form all kinds of metal tools.
It's the omitted facts, right? It's always they always sprinkle in a little bit of truth. Oh, there they are. Okay, they're coming in now. And you know how we got some special guests, right? Lots of attention. So they they always omit facts, right? So that's how they kind of get you to go along with things. It's kind of like the flat earthers, right? They do the same thing. And so all the conspiracies are about omitting certain facts while highlighting others that are you have to generally take on faith, right?
But the question is, what about the tool's strength? Well, even if they were pouring pure copper into a mold, it would still work, but it would need sharpening often. But because archaeologists actually found a few of these metal cramps used by them on site, we now know that they were using a very strong copper arsenic nickel alloy, which made a much stronger final product. Arsenic acts as a deoxidant, preventing the metal from becoming too brittle, and nickel was used in copper alloys specifically to make strong chisels. Once you understand that they had the ability to make strong metal tools in a huge variety of shapes, there is no part of Pumapunku's stonework that would have been too difficult for them. Well, what about these 90-degree right angles that ancient aliens make so much about?
One of the amazing things here at Pumapunku is the precision of the blocks. You can see with this block of granite that it's really been cut at very accurate right angles.
To make flat surfaces with right angles, you don't need alien technology. You only need a square or a simple equivalent. It's important to keep in mind that Pumapunku would have been built thousands of years after the Egyptians, who had all kinds of squares and plumb bobs and levels and so on. It's a pretty basic stoneworking tool. That being said, despite what Ancient Aliens says, Pumapunku is not all perfect right angles. You can even see this, ironically enough, as the Ancient Aliens crew
Right. This is one of the parts too that I really found interesting about this documentary. It's like when they tell you, when you're watching the show and they tell you this stuff, you're kind of just like, you're looking at it, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, wow, that's amazing. It kind of looks all even. But then they're right in front of your face. You can see down here, there's this big gap, right? So that's not a right angle. But they're trying to set up the camera angle the best they can to make you believe that, right? And they're really trying to sell this idea. Well, why is this on the History Channel? Can anybody answer me why this is on the History Channel? I have no idea, right? I have no idea. The History Channel lost a lot of credibility with this show because it's supposed to be about history, right? Maybe it's just the takes on history, or I don't know. It's an entertainment show, right? So they lost a lot of credibility, I think, with a lot of people when this show came out. Let's continue.
Goes around with carpenter squares.
Look at that. I mean, look at that. Look at this. This is not a right angle. Right? You see the shadow. Hilarious, man. But they're just kind of like playing to, I guess, the lowest common denominator, or trying to catch people when they're not really paying full attention. Or maybe it's that whole thing where, like, you become subjective after you've been watching television for a while. So things get through your head faster. But a whole big phenomenon came out of this show, right? Let's see what TR says. He says, why is counting cars or Pawn Stars on the History Channel either? The History Channel does the new history doesn't do history anymore. Smithsonian Channel is way better. I agree.
You can see that some of them are simply not square. Also, they make claims like all the H blocks are the same dimensions, which they say suggests that they were made by a big machine. But not only would that not be the only conclusion if it were true, it's not even true. The dimensions of the H blocks are not all the same, though they are close. It's probably the case that they were made using the same plans. Speaking of plans,
mainstream archaeologists say that Pumapunku was built by the Aymara Indians. And we would all have to agree that in order to build something like Pumapunku, you need writing, you need planning, and you need some sort of a idea where which piece goes and how it ultimately all fits together. But there is one thing that all the mainstream archaeologists agree
I'm surprised they didn't come up with something for the H, right? I'm surprised they didn't come up with something for the H. Like it means howdy or home or something. I don't know.
Agree upon that the Aymara didn't have any writing. So how is it possible that they built all of this without plans?
The builders of Pumapunku may not have had an alphabet, but they did use the common iconography or artwork of their culture called Yayamama. All the icons on the site
yeah, your mama. I've heard that. Yeah, your mama. Yeah. We have a lot of we have some people that are very interested in this channel that like to send little friends over. So you know, we us on YouTube we talk about it, so we're all good. It's no worries.
are Yayamama, not secret alien code, and this is but one of the many indications of the culture and time that it was built. But my point is that, like many cultures, they used pictures instead of an alphabet, and most building plans are done through pictures, like blueprints, for example.
That's one of the things we talked about early on too when we started the series is that the human brain OS, right? And here's the thing: if you're new, hey Frankie, man, how you doing? Yo, mama, right? The one of the things we talk about is that, and so here's the experiment: if a person is born, they're born deaf, right, and they never learn any type of language, do they have an inner voice? So that's the exercise there. And the answer is, and this is a scientifically proven answer, is that the voice is in images. It's not in language. So it's not an auditory language. Like we would hear our inner voice, they would see their inner voice. And that's how it works. So at our core, it's imagery. And we can also qualify that by seeing how archetypes are used in our minds to give us greater sense of greater things. And the point of that is, like, if you have an archetype of evil, right, you can put somebody in that archetype of evil and then eventually convince people that that's how they are. But before we go any further, ladies and gentlemen, we do have a very special guest. I had to figure out really quick on the fly what I'm going to what their intro song was going to be, but then I realized that I already had one already set. And let me just find it, because everybody gets an intro song, because this is a fun show. It's entertaining. And let me just find out where I put that. Let's take 1 second. One second. Here we go. Ready? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show, Katelyn Comments. How you doing?
Hello, good. How are you?
Doing great. Welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
You got it, man. You got it. So this is where we're at in the show. I think I've seen you in the crowd watching. So you're all up on it, and I guess you got all your work done, and now you're here to hang out. Awesome.
I quit. My hands started hurting from taking notes, so we're all done with that tonight.
Okay. Did you find that taking notes helps you remember it better, or you do that for more of an organizational thing, or how does that work with you?
I tried one semester taking notes just on my computer, and it was my worst semester yet. So I take all my notes by hand. I will copy every word off of the PowerPoint. I am that person. Sorry, that's my dog.
No worries.
So yeah, it definitely helps me remember. It's the only way I can learn is by really writing everything down.
Oh, okay. Yes. I believe in that too. Like when you're learning something, to take your own notes, even though AI will now take notes for you in all kinds of special ways. But but I teach my son that as well. I'm like, here, get the notepad. He's getting to that point where he needs to learn how to do that more and more. So he has a very sharp mind, and he can remember a lot of things that I'm just like, wow, how do you just remember that?
Yeah,
he can do things in his mind. I can just like math problems and stuff. I'm like, geez, man.
I'm not that quick or that good at remembering things anymore. So all in the notebook it goes.
That's great, man. And I appreciate that. It takes a lot of discipline to do that as well.
When I have it.
There you go. So I used to take my notes on a computer and then rewrite them by hand in red ink to help me remember. That's a great tool as well, for sure. So what do you think so far? What are your opinions about ancient aliens or aliens in general? And let's get a baseline here.
So I am willing to be convinced that aliens are real, but I have a hard time believing it. And I don't know if I believe any of the ancient alien stuff. I don't know. Like, I guess if you're going to say, well, we can't possibly be the only thing left, the only things in this universe, that they've probably existed for a while, but how much of their technology has existed for that long? Have they gone further than we have? I mean, if there's something out there, we don't know how advanced they are. So saying that they were here, building pyramids, everything that you said before, I agree with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think the same way. And I'm also, we'll probably get into this a little bit later, but also the logic of the visit, right? I tend to like trying to understand, well, what purpose do they have for doing that? Because if you're very advanced, it takes a lot of energy to come to another planet to visit an alien race. What are you going to do? Are you going to fly your flying saucer around and do little tricks? Or are you going to try to make contact? I mean, if you're going to spend all this time building stone pyramids, anything else? I start using logic and the red flags go up. But before we get going, I want to thank T3. She's handing out some memberships right now, and it looks like Rabbit got a membership, Snafu got a membership, Melissa D got a membership. All right, awesome, man. Welcome to the Winner Circle, you guys. I'm so happy that you're here, and I look forward to winning reality with you. All right, thank you so much, T3, for helping bring people into the Winner Circle as well. Thank you so much.
That's awesome.
Okay, here we go.
So saying that no alphabet means no planning is pretty ridiculous in my opinion. Well, what about moving the stones and lifting them into place? Surely that would have required levitation.
Oh, and by the way, surely it would require levitation, right, Katelyn?
It is truly the only way it could have happened.
Right? I know. Forget about anything else. But yeah, and the deal here is too, anytime you want to say something, just ask me to pause it and you're on. Okay?
Okay.
How these massive blocks of granite were moved from their quarries and brought here to Pumapunku would have required some kind of super technology. Levitation and anti-gravity. Huge lifting vehicles. Something that ancient aliens would have had.
Maybe Jedis could have done it. I think Jedis could have done it. I'm pretty sure.
If they did know how to levitate these stones.
Good.
I mean, I guess I may have missed it. How do we know that they were placed there, not just carved out there?
Exactly. They had all the time in the world, man. They didn't have to like do all this crap we have to do these days. They had all the time in the world. Imagine if like all the time people waste these days doing things. These people were out there doing stuff like all the time, So they're like, "What shit? Let's call it. We want to carve a bunch of H's out of rock. Why not? Let's do it." Lady Autumn Sky asks, "Winning reality. Have you ever heard of Coral Castle?" No, I have not. Oh, in Florida?
It sounds cool.
Oh man, I'll have to go check it out, man. It'll be fun. Yeah, where's it at? And I'll go check it out because that'll be a fun little trip for me and the boy to go do. Is it? I'll go check that out. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
Stones. Then they put far too much effort into creating places in the stones to attach ropes to. Many stones at Pumapunku have grooves several centimeters in width and depth on two adjacent faces for holding ropes. They even had special places cut into the stones that Pumapunku scholars call hoisting grips. All very strange things to do if they could simply levitate these blocks. And to make matters worse for the ancient astronaut theory here, according to archaeologist Jean-Pierre Protestant, who is an expert on Pumapunku, there is almost no stone at the Pumapunku
Let's do it,
site
Scott. Welcome,
that does
man.
not
Welcome.
have what he calls drag marks on one of its faces, where it has been, dragged to the site. Ancient Aliens throws up another false dilemma here.
What nobody talks about is the irrefutable fact that we are at an altitude of 12,800 feet, which means we are above the natural tree line.
This guy kills me.
All right, I know. I mean, I mean, what is it like? How do you wake up one day and be like, you know what? I think I'm just gonna make my hair stand straight up. Yeah, that's
Obviously, it was the alien probing.
Yeah, okay, now that explains everything. It had to be that.
It's my only explanation.
Hey man, I think you nailed it.
No trees ever grew in that area, meaning no trees were cut down in order to use wooden rollers. The wooden roller theory falls by the wayside.
This is like saying that there's no way that the Egyptians used wood because trees didn't grow in Egypt, which is true. The difference is that while the Egyptians had to import wood from places like Lebanon, it would have been far easier for those at Pumapunku to solve this problem. All they would have had to do is simply walk down the hill a little bit. Okay, well, what about this claim?
Logic does not exist at Pumapunku because
Evidently
there
not.
we have megalithic structures which just lie about this entire site as if ripped apart by some sort of a great force.
I propose that logic still
Or
exists at
the
Pumapunku.
shifting of the tectonic plates.
Yeah, you know, this iron bar here, or whatever that is, might be helping out. Looks like people have been moving these things around for a while. Just hold it up. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Could have been a few earthquakes there, a little bit of weather, you know.
Scattered state of the complex can easily be explained. Quoting from archaeologist Alexei Vranich, quote, "The high quality of the stones made it attractive building material for houses, churches, plazas, bridges, even railways." In other words, the stones were pulled down and hauled off by locals for building material. In fact, we have the 400-year-old writings of a visitor to Pumapunku who said that the looting was in full swing even back then. He wrote that if the site was closer to town, he didn't think there would have been any stones left at all. Ancient Alien says that Pumapunku is 17,000 years old. This is what Vranich said of this claim. Quote, "The idea that Tiwanaku is 14,000 years old is based on a rather faulty study done in 1926. Since then, there has been a huge quantity of work, both on the archaeology and the geology of the area, and all data indicates that Tiwanaku existed from around AD 300 to 500. For more information on the faulty study he's referring to here, I will quote at length from Jason Colavito, who has been debunking ancient astronaut theories for years in his books and blogs. He said the following about this claim. Quote, "Tiwanaku is not 17,000 years old. This date derives from the work of Arthur Poznański, who tried to apply archaeoastronomy to the site, but did so in ways that modern scholars do not recognize as legitimate. Poznański proposed a date of 15,000 BP, before present, i.e. 13,000 BCE, which the geniuses on Ancient Aliens misread as 15,000 BCE, adding an extra 2,000 years onto Poznański's already flawed dates. Here's what he did wrong. Poznański assumed that the Kalasasaya temple at Tiwanaku was laid out with perfect accuracy to align to the equinoxes and solstices that he felt but could not prove were important to the Tiwanaku people. Thus, on a certain day, the sun was supposed to rise above one rock at the temple and set behind another. Ah, but which rock should we choose? Since the current ruins do not align with these celestial events accurately, he concluded that the ruins must have been built at a time when they would have aligned with that event. Since the sun and sky change positions at a predictable rate due to the gradual changes in the angle of the Earth's axis, he concluded that the Kalasasaya temple was built in 13,000 BCE as a solar observatory, despite no other evidence of solar astronomy at the site. The long and the short of it is that Poznański assumed celestial alignments and assumed flawless construction, and then used his assumptions to prove that his assumptions were correct. Colavito also has this picture of the site with the caption, "Pick a rock, any rock, one of them must align with something." This site has been dated using a huge variety of methods, things like carbon dating, the type of metals they used, the debris found in certain places, the type of iconography they used. Literally every kind of dating method applied comes to the same conclusion. It was constructed in the early Middle Ages. Before we conclude this section on Pumapunku, there are two other claims I wanted to address.
The Spanish conqueror asked the Inca, the people living there, including the king of the Inca, "What is this Pumapunku?" And they all said, "It's not us, It's not our forefather who make this. This were made by the gods in one single night. Usually a king is proud about what his people did, about the precision and so on. In that case, the chief and the people said, no, it was not us. It was the gods who made it.
If you understand a little about the Incan imperial system and religion, you will understand why the Incans didn't claim the site, and even why they claimed that it had a supernatural origin. Part of the Incan state religion was that the Incan Empire was the first civilization, and it was created by God himself. It was a very convenient idea for bolstering the Incan case for the right to rule everyone else. When the Incans arrived at Pumapunku, the site had already been abandoned for at least 100 years. Admitting that there was a pre-Incan culture at all, let alone one with more skill than them, would have been detrimental to the whole scheme. So they slightly modified their already existing mythology to include Pumapunku. So instead of Viracocha creating the Incan capital, he also created Pumapunku. And just like that, the Incans were still the oldest and greatest civilization, even though everyone probably knew it wasn't true. And finally, Ancient Aliens says the following about what the ancient local people believed regarding who constructed Pumapunku.
Local legends suggest that Tiahuanaco was built as a site of religious pilgrimage to celebrate the arrival of sky gods.
But this is a total lie. Viracocha came from the sea, not from the sky. This is a very sneaky move by Ancient Aliens, in my opinion. So, in conclusion, the stones are not made of granite and diorite. The stones were easily workable with the tools available to the Andean culture, tools which we know included high-quality metal alloyed chisels. These tools would have been more than sufficient to make the angles seen at Pumapunku. The faces of the rocks have been finished using a polishing technique after being rough cut using stone hammers, evidenced by the unfinished stones and hidden areas of the finished stones. The moving of the stones was not as difficult as Ancient Aliens makes it seem, especially when you take into account that they are telling people that the stones weigh 600 tons more than they actually do. The stones have telltale drag marks and hoisting holes for ropes, all showing that they were not levitated as Ancient Aliens would have us believe. We know the culture which built this monument, and all the iconography and sculptures are consistent with that culture, and the various methods of dating that scientists use all point to the same time period. The idea that Pumapunku was from Atlantean times we now know is based on a very transparently flawed presupposition.
Yeah, this is the kind of research that, average person watching the show wouldn't think to go do, right?
Definitely. I mean, I was going to say he's lining up a lot of things, and there's a lot of information there that, I mean, I'm impressed. And I had never heard of Pumapunku before this, but I don't believe it was built by aliens.
Right? Yeah, I know. But it's funny. The whole thing is they can just get on the History Channel and kind of just make these things up. And what we're going to find out is this Ancient Aliens program is a stepping stone into the Disclosure Project. So that's what's going to come up next. That's what we're going to cover next. Not tonight, but next show. Probably next show or two. We're going to cover the Disclosure Project. And because they're ramping back up. A lot of people don't know this, but they're on the ramp up right now. So they're getting ready to reemerge and be back in the spotlight here before too long. With all this UFO, UEP stuff that's going on, or UAP stuff that's going on. Mm-hmm. Here we go, the pyramids. Now, Katelyn, have you ever been to Egypt?
I haven't. The only cool place I've ever been is Ireland.
Well, that's a cool place. For
yeah,
sure,
I got to go this year. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome. I hear it's a great time. I went to the pyramids when I was 20. I was in college. I actually got college credit for going in philosophy and botany because we were collecting plant samples as well. So
nice.
I do have a 4.0 GPA at one college out there. So but it was a very interesting trip. I really appreciated it and had a great time, but I was 20 years old too. So I was just I was still in that having a blast mood, college mood. For my generation, which is heavily influenced by movies like Animal House and other things. But man, we went to all these places. I got tons of pictures of it. I learned a lot about the culture and the people there, things you wouldn't imagine or even think of. I probably risked my life about 20 times on the time I was there. I'm extremely lucky I didn't get kidnapped or end up in some kind of situation honestly, I had a lot of luck on my side in those days. But I definitely was full blown, a lot really clueless in a lot of ways too. I took a lot of risks, and but it was fun. It was fun, and there's some things you can't do when you're in a Muslim country, and I'm pretty sure I did all of them.
Yeah, probably. That sounds like a really good start to a Bert Kreischer type story. Like he has the machine story about him going to Russia. Your Egypt story sounds very similar.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You really shouldn't go out at night by yourself.
No, I wouldn't do that. I don't do that here.
I'm pretty brave, and I was even more brave back then. In fact, I was pretty sure I was immortal back then. So I knew I'd make it back to the Botel. Let's see. Lady Autumn Sky says Kellerall Castle is a limestone structure created by the help me with this one. Latvian American, located in Miami-Dade County, Florida. Okay. Built single-handedly using reverse magnetism and supernatural abilities to move and carve the stones. Wow, that's interesting, man. I gotta check that out for sure. Hey. Okay, so it's 1887 to 1951. Eccentric Edward Leedscannell Lily. Okay, Leedscallon. All right, there we go. Oops, clicked the wrong screen.
Perhaps the most familiar and most mysterious megalithic structure in all the world is the Great Pyramid of Giza. The enormous size and weight of the...
I stood on those right there. I stood on those. You can climb on them. They don't care. They won't let you climb all the way to the top, but you can jump up on them, take a picture too. Yeah, I stood right on them. And when you get up close to them, you realize, wow, they're not as neat looking as they make them look on TV, or from a distance they look really neat and smooth and stuff. Nah, man, it's jagged, and they're really tall too. They are tall, but you can climb up on them, no problem. I think there's a picture of me pretending like I'm peeing on it, but again, I was I'm looking back over my sort of going,
that tracks.
Yeah, definitely. It's like that. But yeah, you definitely get a sense of what it's like. And now let me tell you, the first thing that happens when you start to walk up to the pyramids of Giza, the very first thing that happens is you get mobbed by about 5 to 10 different people trying to sell you crap. And then you get mobbed by a bunch of people trying to make you take a camel ride. And they go, get up on the camel, take a picture, right? And then what they do is they put you on the camel, right? And then they won't give you your camera back, or they won't let you back down from the camel until you pay them. Yeah. Another guy took.
How many camel rides did you take?
Only one, but but another guy took off. Took off with a girl's camera that was on there, and I had to chase him down. That was interesting. Another guy tried to sell us trinket crap, just little 1 cent trinkets. He tried to sell us that stuff past a certain line, and he got the crap whipped out of him with this cop with a reed. He was just like, "Oh, knock!" and just got to beat the crap out of him. I'm like, "See,
oh my gosh,
that's what you get for selling that crap." Yeah, they're not allowed to go past a certain point. So the first thing you learn is there's grifters everywhere, and they're right outside the pyramids. So for anybody going to the pyramids, look out for the grifters, man. They're waiting for you. But the experience is great. You get to go inside too. It's pretty cool.
That's awesome. It's definitely on my list of places to go.
Yeah, definitely for sure. It's worth the trip. Don't spend too much time there, but get in a good group. And I like the way we went. We went with the college group. It was a couple of different colleges that were all together. But the trip we took was awesome. It was well organized. The guy who ran it was kind of a creep, but the whole thing was cool. And we had this great boatel. A boatel is a boat that's a hotel, right? It's kind of like a cruise ship, but on a river. And so we went up the Nile River on that for weeks. It was so much fun, and we'd stop at the different sites. And literally my room had water. You could look out the window, and it's half water. It was half water. So I was just on the Nile. We had a pool up top. We had a hot tub. We did all, we ate on there, all kinds of stuff. It was fun.
That's awesome.
It's a great way to earn college credits in the summer.
Number of them makes one thing certain. The construction of the Great Pyramid remains one of the greatest marvels and mysteries of architectural engineering.
The pyramids at Giza are marvels of engineering, and there are many theories about how they were constructed, from the mundane to the fantastic.
There are all kinds of theories on how the Great Pyramid of Giza was built. So many theories, you just sit back and shake your head. And that includes ET visitations, levitating the blocks with some kind of sound system.
One place we can...
Okay, there you go. See, this is the walk up right here. It's to another one, a different one. But you can see Cairo in the background, like one of the big cities. I think this is what I'm looking at here. And yeah, there's the walk up. Let's see, where are the camel guys? I can't really scroll in, but there's a couple of horses. Now they also have horses too. Like one of the cool things I did in Egypt was I rode a horse across the desert. Yeah, I had my own horse. This guy tried to take me way out and away and try to get more money out of me to bring me back. And I was like, no. He didn't think I knew how to ride a horse. Hey, Shiz, what's up? Hey, Suzanne, how you doing? How you doing? Welcome, everybody. I know Suzanne's not feeling well. She's got a migraine, but thank you for being here, darling. Hope you feel better. And ShizzyWhizNut, how you doing, brother? I'm so glad you're here. Yeah, so he didn't know I knew how to ride horses, so I was just like, yeah, and kicked the horse around. Like, then he had to chase me. But it was fun. It was worth the saddle rash I got on my calf over that too. But I had a blast riding it across the desert. And of course, I was like cheesed out too. I had one of those tourist turbans on, so I looked like an Arab. You know what I'm talking about? Like you put the towel on your head and you put the rope around it. Oh, it's so good. It was so good. I was all about it. I was all about being a spectacle and making people laugh. I guess I've changed a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, a lot.
There you go, T-Rex. I've been through the desert on a horse with no name. Absolutely. It's true. I don't know the name of that horse at all.
Learn a lot about Egyptian stone cutting methods is from the so-called unfinished obelisk. Here we have a 1,000-ton obelisk made of granite, which was abandoned midway through the project because of a crack that developed. This stone, because it is unfinished, gives us direct insight into how they cut and shaped granite, as well as other stones. On the sides, we can see how these stones were separated from the quarry. A team of workers would line up side by side and pound their sections with a diorite pounding stone. Such pounding stones can be found all over this and other quarries in Egypt. This pounding only broke off millimeters of granite at a time, but eventually these trough-like sections emerged at each worker's station. After that, they would do the same thing on the bottom of the block, until it was supported only by a thin spine in the middle. Then it would be snapped off using levers. The people who created the Moai statues at Easter Island used very similar methods for quarrying stone, as did many other groups around the world, as we will see. After the stones had been roughly shaped using pounding stones, they would then begin to polish them with grinders. There have been many types of stone grinders or polishers found in ancient Egypt. They usually had a handle with a flat surface, which they would use to rub against the stone with sand as the abrasive. They were, well, sanding the stone. The various mineral particles found in sand are hard enough not only to polish hard stones like granite, but also to do what Ancient Aliens tries to make people think is utterly impossible. That is, to cut granite. The Egyptians had a variety of ways to cut granite, mostly involving copper and sand. There are plenty of saw marks on granite stones in Egypt, at the granite quarries, of course, as well as certain notable ones, like the famous granite sarcophagus in the Great Pyramid. The person who was doing the sawing on the sarcophagus sawed for a while at the wrong angle before realizing his mistake and going in the right direction, which left a pretty big mark for us to study. These copper saws came in three basic styles. One was a two-person saw, like an old-time lumber saw. Another type was a small, handheld saw with a wooden handle. And finally, there was a tubular saw for making holes in granite and other stones. These saws are depicted in several Egyptian reliefs. Interestingly, they didn't require saw teeth to work. They only required sand to be placed between the saw and the stones. The sand was what did the cutting. This particular method of stone cutting has been tested by ancient Egyptian tool experts, and not only was it done, but it was apparently quite easy to do. However, sawing granite with copper was expensive because the copper would wear out somewhat quickly. Therefore, you mostly see granite in ancient Egypt being worked with pounding stones, finished with grinders and chisels. The saw work was reserved primarily for royal projects, like that of the sarcophagus. All of this really makes Ancient Aliens lose credibility, because all throughout the series, they make it sound like working with granite was only possible using diamond-tipped alien power tools. But as all this relates to the Great Pyramid's construction,
That's a
it's
great view
important
of it
to
right
remember
there.
that almost none of the pyramid is made from granite, except for a few things like the roof supports for the king's chamber. Most of the stone was sandstone and limestone.
There you go. See, those camels are sitting there waiting for someone to sit on them, and they bring them up. They hiss at the camels. They hiss at them. It's crazy. Yeah, these are all the grifters out there. See, this guy, they're riding around looking for you. They're all there. See, he's got a little whip there where he whips the camel. Yep. This guy's like, please don't come back, dude. But yeah, you know, the thing is, people don't, we lose concept of time, right? We lose concept of time. Like back then, they had all the slave labor they could possibly want, and they had all day long with nothing else to do. You get out with that, and you just grind here, right? And it's like you ground, or you get whipped, or you don't eat. That's your choices. So it's not beyond comprehension that with that much time on and that much leverage or human resource, that these things could be built. It's just like people skip to the, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I can totally see it. It looks impossible to me, without considering the fine details of this stuff. And that's how these grifters work. That's how they get people to buy into this stuff. And then once they're in the door, they can kind of walk them down the path to more outlandish and ridiculous things. And you get to the point where people are just running around spouting off, things that are so crazy people won't even listen to them. And when it comes to saying, "Hey, look, I want a president that's honest, like this guy, or I want a president that is not like the other guys," and they're like, "You don't have no credibility. I don't want to listen to you anyways." At this point, this is a guy who thinks the aliens are coming to save us, right? It's wild how it works. But anyways, the stepping stones and the whole pyramid thing itself is very interesting, I think.
About 85% of the stone used in the construction of the pyramids was relatively soft sandstone, which was quarried right on site. That's right, the Great Pyramid was built right in the middle of a massive sandstone quarry, which was no doubt at least one factor in choosing the location to build it. The other 15% of the stones, like that of limestone and granite, would have to be brought in from a slightly further away location. So this raises another question. What about moving these stones? Surely the only way is by levitation, as Ancient Aliens claims.
In order to really
And don't call me
move
Shirley.
massive amounts of stone like that, they would have had to have been levitated, somehow made weightless, and then just moved through the air by some kind of device, perhaps even a handheld kind of device, like some beam weapon.
If levitation was the way that the ancient Egyptians moved,
They just flash a picture up there of some people holding two knives. They're doing what they're doing in that picture. Because we went through and we had an Egyptologist with us, and he would read to us all the hieroglyphics and what they meant. What they're doing in that was a mummification ritual. That's why they have the two knives right there.
Okay.
Mhm.
All I'm picturing right now is a spaceship coming out with like one of those claw machine things and picking up the blocks and putting them in place, and just thinking about how difficult it is to actually win a prize on those, and how difficult it would be to do from a UFO.
Right? Yeah.
It makes sense.
Yeah, we have nothing better to do. We have nothing better to do than do this. Like, why did I get on the stupid pyramid building squad? I could be fighting the other aliens and halfway across the galaxy, but I get stuck doing this. Jesus, what a crappy job.
Wars, but let's build some pyramids.
Okay, all y'all calm down. We're gonna build you some pyramids, all right? All right, here we go. Oh, look at this. I love the imagery that they're just putting this in here. Yep. I hope it does something cool.
They had a funny way of showing it, because there are plenty of depictions of them using wooden sleds to move everything from blocks the size and shape of the ones used for the pyramid to massive 1,000-ton monuments and obelisks, all using wooden sleds. They even had a hieroglyph for the word sled, which they used often. In fact, 3 such sleds have been found intact by archaeologists, and they have all kinds of places to attach ropes to. Speaking of ropes, ropes made out of papyrus and other materials have been found in Egypt, some of them with a massive circumference, suggesting that they were used for extremely heavy objects. Boats were used for stones that needed to be imported. In fact, a channel was dug from the Nile to the construction site, so no stone had to be dragged very far anyway. So, what about the construction of the pyramids? How exactly was it done? Part of the reason that the ancient aliens perspective is attractive is because some of the other popular theories concerning the pyramid's construction have serious problems, such as the single ramp theory, which would have had to extend out more than a mile and would have had to have more stones in it than the pyramid itself. Another one is the spiral ramp theory. This one is problematic because some of the ledges only had about 2 feet or less to work with, certainly not enough to hold a ledge that would carry workers and stones the size of the ones used. Also, a structure like the pyramid would have had to have been constantly monitored for geometric accuracy as it progressed upwards, because being even a few inches off on a lower level could cause the top to be off by a huge amount. And a spiral ramp would have made it impossible to survey the geometric accuracy of the pyramid as it progressed. Add to this that there's no actual evidence for either of those theories, and you can see why people are looking for alternatives. While doing research for this documentary, I came across a new theory about the pyramid's construction that I had not heard before. At first, I planned to mention it only briefly, but the more I heard of this theory, the more convinced I became of its validity. It was proposed not by an Egyptologist, but by an eccentric French architect named Jean-Pierre Houdin. And if Jean-Pierre is correct, knowing how the blocks were raised in the pyramid also happens to explain some of the other mysteries, like the purpose for the odd-shaped grand gallery, as well as the purpose of the granite blocks above the king's chamber, and why there were 3 burial chambers cut at different levels in the pyramid, 2 of which were unused. I will very briefly explain this theory, but I highly encourage you to visit the links at the website on your screen, because the specifics of this theory are something that any pyramid enthusiast should be very familiar with, in my opinion. The basic idea is that there was an internal ramp in the Great Pyramid, and workers dragged the blocks through it until they reached the corners, at which point the block was repositioned for another team to pull it up the next ramp. Also, the exterior limestone blocks with the polished finish would have been positioned and aligned first to ensure geometric accuracy, and then the sandstone blocks would have been positioned behind them as filler. This would mean that all the internal chambers, like the Queen and King's chamber, were built as the pyramid progressed upwards in the light of day. This internal ramp theory, unlike some of the others, is actually supported by quite a lot of physical evidence. For example, in the 1980s, a French team, looking for hidden chambers, conducted a full-scale gravimetric survey of the Great Pyramid, kind of like a giant X-ray map of the entire pyramid. They actually found evidence of this internal ramp through their study, but they had no idea what to think.
Real quick. Ladies and gentlemen, hold on. I'm going to pull this down for a second. Ladies and gentlemen, we have another guest coming in.
Oh, yay.
Exciting. Where did I put that thing? It's just put out. Some guests have intros now. I have to work on an intro for you, Katelyn. But yeah, everybody gets an intro. This guest has an intro, and let me just find it. Hopefully, I just set it up. Oh, there it is. Okay. So I thought he might show up, so I kind of set it up. Let's get this going, and then he'll be right in. And I got to get his real intro back together, by the way. But let me share this up. And
this bullet just handed to me. Stricken airliner approaching Chicago. 面白いよ。ニュースの実感で宇田発行が伝えます。エイズストライカー。Particularly miles, of course. That's impossible. They're on instruments.
Welcome to the stream. How you doing, ShizzyWhizNut?
Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey.
Great, man. So happy you decided to join us this evening.
Yes.
You know Katelyn comments, right?
Yes, we have not officially met, but I've seen your streams.
Well, Katelyn,
Nice
meet
to
Shizzy.
meet you.
He's a cool ass dude, man. We're bros, man, and I'm happy that it's here tonight. And Katelyn's awesome. I was just on her show recently. We did really well over there. Had a lot of fun. We talked football, and we talked parenting, and we talked all kinds of cool stuff.
Yes,
Shizzy
it
has a
was.
great channel as well. By the
It
way.
was good. I didn't catch the football portion of it because, well, I was spending time with my lovely wife. So
That's awesome, dude. Yeah, you do have indeed have a lovely wife and a lovely family, man. Shizzy just got back from Italy.
Mhm.
He just did a nice trip over
So
there.
jealous.
yes, it was fun. It was a good trip. I'm still compiling all of the pictures and everything to post up on a stream. I'm probably do that on a weekend, but tomorrow I'll be going through some more of the John Wayne Todd tapes. It's tough. It's a tough listen.
Oh yeah, I bet, man. I bet. I'll come check that out for sure.
Definitely.
Absolutely. So, what do you think of these ancient aliens? This ancient alien stuff.
I just love people coming in and debunking it. It's such a beautiful thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. Did you ever watch this show?
What this particular one? No.
No, I mean the actual series, Ancient Aliens, that was on History Channel. Have you ever seen that?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Well, cool. This will be a fresh look for you then. We're at the pyramids here. Have you been to the pyramids before?
Nope.
Okay. You guys should do that trip one time. And like I was saying, do the Botel stuff. That's fun. Go with the group. Because the group, when you go with the group, they have machine guns. You get guards. You get guards, so you'll be nice and safe.
Yes.
Oh, hey, what's up, Madcore? How you doing, brother?
Yeah,
Thank you so much for being here, man.
That's
Awesome to see you. All right, here we go. Oh, yeah, by the way, let me just go ahead and add this to the stream.
In addition, there is this notch high up on the Great Pyramid, which
you never get so good you can't boomer something. Trust me on that.
we were walking like Egyptians over here.
I like that. Oh man, that was a great song. I should have used that one for tonight. Hey, Scott. Shizzy, you remember Scott from the other night on Lincoln?
Yeah,
we were on there.
Scott.
Yeah, that's
What's up,
Scott,
brother?
dude. Yeah,
dude, awesome.
Dude, he was filling me in on some details last night about that, and dude, that stream was so much fun and so funny.
It was such a blast. I was loving it, man. And so his channel is just gone.
Oh man, that sucks. I know. I hope he gets it back.
I hope so too, because man,
Yep,
good to see you too, Scott. Yeah, that was rough. It was very rough.
Wait, who?
Oh, it's this guy named Lincoln Kane. This guy is as cool as the other side of the pillow, man. He is an Australian, and he's got this whole studio. I think he does music a lot of music, it seems like. But he's just chilling out. He's sitting there. He's got his sunglasses, his hat, and he runs his show like I've never seen anybody else run it before. He lets anybody on his panel, right? And then they stir up the conversation. But I think there's a few people that are regulars that help kind of stir up some dust from time to time, right? And so when that happens, or when he wants to interview someone, he'll put people backstage, like back and forth and up and down. It's constantly in motion, which I thought was really cool. It kind of keeps the attention going. And then he has some people on there that are super duper annoying, right? Or they annoy other people, right? And then you could pay to have them put backstage. So like he's making $10 for 5 minutes just putting the annoying person backstage. And it's so funny because they're just talking and then boop, they're gone. And then they come back in 5 minutes. What happened? It's so good. And if a
So I literally just subscribed to him, I think last week or the week before.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened to his channel?
4th of July stream. I believe that someone bombed him. As far as they came in posing as someone else, and they actually were not that person, or not even close to that person. They may have even had their icon or something like that. So there was no image. He didn't see a person. All he saw was, here, I'll show you. All he saw was something like this that came in. And then whenever what normally they would have turned on the camera, it probably flipped over to porn. And
did we miss that?
Yeah,
when did that happen?
That happened July 4th.
Oh no, was that before we got there?
No, that was after we got there. That was the next day.
Oh, people suck.
Yeah,
people really suck, man.
Yeah,
it's terrible.
Someone tried doing that
to
the expert, and he quelled that stuff really quick. So you have to be careful whenever you're letting people in.
Yeah, we were kind of amazed. A bunch of us were hanging out after Shizzy's show. Yeah, it's gone, Medcor.
It is gone.
We were hanging out after Shizzy's show, just hanging out and chilling and talking, and then Valhalla noticed that he was on. He's like, dude, the link's in the chat. We're like, let's all go. Let's all run in there. It was a blast. It was a lot of fun. I had to make myself go to bed.
Yeah, I did too. 4:30 in the morning, I crawled into bed and then was back up at 8 in the morning to work.
I think I lasted till maybe 6. But the Valhalla Harlord the battle was something else.
Oh yeah,
that was so funny, dude. I mean, I bought it. Now Scott told me that that's just wait, hold on, that's not Scott. Scott told me that that's just Harlord's act, right?
Yep.
I didn't know that, dude. And I was like, bravo. I think he deserves an Oscar, man. I want to give him an award.
Yep.
That was the best job of trolling acting I've ever seen. And he just sat there and laughed through the whole damn thing. Dude, he's really good at it, man. He's really good at it. Thumbs up, 2 thumbs up for that performance, man. I think it was awesome.
Yes.
Shiny Chanel is woman's name. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I feel bad that he's got his channel gone. I hope he gets it back or gets something back up and running, because that's just ridiculous.
Me too, man. And he really runs a fun show, dude. It's so much fun. I'm so happy I at least got to be on it once, you know.
Absolutely.
Let's see what Matt Core says. They got him. That's what happens when you have open invites. Never do it when you're a small channel. He will find it had to get it back. Find it hard to get back now. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. He's not a small channel. That's the thing.
8,000. Yeah, he's good.
He had over 8,000 followers on that channel. Subs. I mean, and people were super chatting like crazy. I guess he used to be a mod for a bunch of people, or he still is a mod.
Yeah, it's amazing, dude. No, I think he had like 40 some super chats by the time it was over, and ranging from 99 cents to $20 to $50.
Oh, I saw $100 super chats coming in. I mean, he was making he was making Nick look bad.
It was so good because he didn't have to really read the super chats. They were just asking him to do something.
Yeah.
Even better, man. 10 minutes. You're in the back for 10 minutes. And he had a timer on his phone. Such a pro.
Oh, man.
8,000 subs is small when playing porn.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
According to Jean-Pierre, rests exactly on the 7% grade where you would expect to find the internal ramp, and would be at the exact place where the workers would have lifted the blocks and changed the direction for the pullers. Bob Breyer, an Egyptologist who was working with Jean-Pierre, was only allowed a few minutes to survey this notch and take a few pictures and measurements. They found that there was indeed a large space behind these stones, and they made extensive computer models with the pictures that were taken. As of 2012, the team is still waiting for clearance from the Egyptian authorities to conduct a full-scale survey of this notch. But perhaps even more interesting than this is the purpose for the Grand Gallery and the granite stones above the King's Chamber. I mention them together because, according to Jean-Pierre, they are intimately connected. First, it's important to know the main difference between the Great Pyramid and the other 2 pyramids at Giza is that the Great Pyramid's burial chamber was inside the pyramid. The other 2 were underground, cut directly into the bedrock, which meant that in those 2 pyramids, they did not have to worry about the hundreds of thousands of tons of stone above it collapsing onto the tomb. The Great Pyramid was different. Its chambers were in the middle of the pyramid, and because of this, the designer had to get creative to prevent the stones from collapsing in on the chambers. In earlier pyramids in the area, this had been accomplished using a stone roof that came together at an apex, which distributed the weight of the blocks away from the chamber. But for the Great Pyramid, the designer wanted to be more ornate, opting for a flat roof in the King's Chamber, which would have easily collapsed if he didn't find a way to distribute the weight of the stones above it away from the roof. He ingeniously added a series of large granite blocks, spaced out evenly above the chamber, capping those stones with the same apex roof idea from the earlier pyramids, which distributed the weight safely away from the King's Chamber ceiling. This did indeed solve the problem of the weight of the stones collapsing the chamber, but it caused another problem. How could you get those granite stones up there for placement? They would have been too big for the internal ramp and too heavy even at a 7% incline. For the solution, we look to the Grand Gallery. The Grand Gallery has puzzled Egyptologists ever since it was discovered. It's such an odd shape, and it doesn't seem to make sense to construct it the way it's constructed if it's simply a path to get from point A to point B. This has led to much speculation about its purpose. Jean-Pierre has proposed that the Grand Gallery was used as a massive counterweight system, where a wooden trolley was loaded with stones and rigged with ropes and was used to provide the force to lift the heaviest objects. Basically, it was the equivalent of a freight elevator. There's actually a lot of physical evidence for this too, and it explains all kinds of peculiar details about the Grand Gallery. For example, the odd holes in the so-called benches of the Grand Gallery were used to connect a wooden guide system for the trolley. It also explains why there are remnants of grease as well as scratches along the bottom of the chamber where the trolley would have rubbed against the stone. It was apparently lubricated to make it run smoother.
Now, this right here is just a testament to the human mind, that they could come up with this stuff. And it also shows you that we haven't changed that much over time either. No. People were brilliant then, and they're brilliant now. But this part's always amazed me, like how they came up with this and the engineer minds at work. You know, I'm not going to give that credit to any aliens, like, you know, tractor beams. These people actually put their minds to it and made it happen.
Well, and you have to understand that, you know, people think that the wheel is a new invention, but it's been around for quite some time, and that's all they were doing is just putting that to use.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of cultures where they say, well, they're not very civilized because they never used the wheel. They didn't use the wheel until this time period, and everybody else had it. Well, their kids had wheels on their toys, but they didn't have a practical use for the wheel, so they used other things. It had to do with the environment and where they were.
Right.
So they knew what a wheel was. You know, they just didn't have any need for it.
The odd way the stones were worn at the top of the so-called step of the Grand Gallery, exactly where the ropes would have had to be. This area has now been cemented over to make a step, but you can see in the old pictures what it looked like when the first explorers arrived. This freight elevator would have required a small external ramp, which there is some evidence for. And even those who oppose the long single ramp theory agree that there probably was a small ramp at the beginning of the construction. This ramp would have been dismantled after the completion of the king's chamber, and the stones would have been dragged up the internal ramp to finish the rest of the pyramid. Jean-Pierre and his team have made a lot of converts to this idea, including a number of well-respected Egyptologists and pyramid experts. But as of 2012, they are still in the final stages of being approved by the Egyptian government for more work on the site.
Houdin's idea of an internal ramp, I think, is coherent. I think there's good circumstantial evidence for it. If you have watched the National Geographic special on his view, I think you would agree that there is good circumstantial evidence for it. It has a lot of explanatory power for a lot of the fundamental questions. And I think it's important because Houdin's theory depends on a very simple idea in engineering, both in the ancient world and in today's world, and that is the use of weight and counterweight, using the weight of one object to lift an object of greater weight.
Whether or not this theory proves to be perfectly true in every respect will hopefully soon be seen. But I at least hope that by now, most of us can see that these construction techniques are well within the capability of mankind to conceive of and to do without the intervention of aliens.
Baalbek.
Eastern Lebanon.
Any final thoughts on the pyramids, guys? Katelyn, what do you think?
I mean, I think all of the circumstantial evidence that they put up there for the debunking theory makes sense to me more than ancient aliens being out there, you know, levitating stones out of thin air and putting them up in perfect placement with a claw machine handle.
Right.
It's all I can picture now.
Right. I mean,
it's just not happening.
Well, and it also goes to show how, because, okay, if you're going to say, and I'm just being the voice of unreason here, if you're going to say that the aliens are the ones that were moving all of this stuff, well, then explain all of these tool marks and the reasons for these other things having grease inside there, things of that sort. what they just decided to like grease like pigs for slaughter. I mean, give me a good explanation why those parts would be in there, if not for the ingenuity of some long ago engineer.
Yeah. Again, I always said this earlier, but I always go back to purpose. I like, what is the purpose of them building this? Now we're seeing it up close, right? We're seeing that it's not an energy machine, it's not a time machine, it's not anything but a tomb, right? I mean, I've been inside of it. It's a tomb. I'm telling you guys. Seriously, that's all it is. Oh, look at this, man! Predator God, what's up, dude? This is anti-alien propaganda. Aliens can use grease tools too. Aliens like pork too.
I love it. I love it, Predator God.
Man. Awesome, just awesome to see you, brother. It's been a while, man. Thank you for being here. Yeah. We have to watch. We can't discriminate against the aliens. They can use
wasn't.
They want to get probed, get abducted and probed.
Or maybe we do want to get probed.
No. I hear you've been talking about us. All right.
Ka Valley. Here, at this archaeological site, stand the ruins of Heliopolis, built in the 4th century BC by Alexander the Great to honor Zeus. But beneath the Corinthian columns and remnants of both Greek and Roman architecture lie the ruins of a site that is much, much older. According to archaeologists, it dates back nearly 9,000 years. Wow. The ancient city of Baalbek, named after the early Canaanite deity Baal.
And so because it was already sacred to the god Baal, then later the Greeks and the Romans then would build temples on this very same spot.
Archaeological surveys have revealed that the enormous stone foundation that lies at the base of the site dates back tens of thousands of years. But even more significant to ancient astronaut theorists is their belief that the colossal stone platform may once have served as a landing pad for space travelers.
Ooh, nice.
The idea that ancient
Use
aliens
the
will try
landing
to
pad.
convey is that underneath the Roman ruins lies a very old platform that was once used to launch spacecraft. As we watch the next clip, listen for the first thing they cite as evidence for this
Wait,
claim.
I have a
But
question.
what was originally there before the Roman temple was
Pause.
Thank you.
Landing pad. Okay.
Yes.
So is this a situation where the landing pad is something that they needed for takeoff and landing, or just like, hey, we're going to build this pad. If there's aliens out there, come and land on it.
Right. Yeah. I'm not sure.
Just
Just wanted
so
to have them.
happened.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. It's a long way from Mexico to Egypt.
Maybe they just wanted to have a good experience, a good user experience for them. You know, look at that. They've built us a landing pad and everything. What sweet little humans they are. Look at the land now.
Or maybe it's just a dot to an I.
Could be.
Maybe they were saying hi. They're not showing the H and the small portion of it. They're just showing that little piece of the I.
Oh yeah,
That's because the H's were already in what was it called?
Yeah. Poop.
Poop.
Yeah. That Paula got. I'm gonna try to say it.
Palapaki?
All right, Chad, help us out, man.
See, this is what happened.
The H's were there.
Pumagatu or something. Pumagatu. Yeah.
So that's where the H's were. Here's the dot for the I. Now we just need to find the other piece of the I.
There you go. All right. Pumapunku. That's it. That's why I was. See, it was scattered around in different pieces in my head. I had to run like a sys check there and kind of bring them all back together, and it real quick there. All right. Yeah. All right. We got that word. Just nobody forget it. Let's go.
this spaceport platform that was apparently used for extraterrestrials coming and going on planet Earth.
As evidence, researchers point to the gigantic megalithic stones incorporated into the foundation, each weighing between 800 to 1,200 tons, and perfectly fitted together.
These three stones they're referring to are called the trilithons, and the heaviest of the three is 800 tons, not 1,200 tons as they say. There are two other stones that are heavier than this around the area, but they are unused, still connected to the bedrock in the quarries.
There's the
Thus
eye.
are obviously not part of the trilithon.
I got
The
it.
way the information is presented about these three stones leads the viewer to believe that they are part of the foundation or platform of the Baalbek site. What they want the viewer to think is that spacecraft lifted off and landed on the stones of this platform. They also claim that these three stones cannot be of Roman construction, as the mainstream archaeologists believe, but they say that they were part of the earliest structure at the Baalbek site, and that the Greeks and Romans only built on top of this ancient foundation. And it is true that there was a very old pre-Roman temple at this site, but we will learn more about that later. Our focus at the moment is the trilithon stones. Ancient Alien says that these three stones are the real mystery of Baalbek.
This is the real mystery of Baalbek, how these stones came to be there, why they were placed there, and specifically how they were transported into place, because some of the stones are of such magnitude that modern machinery is incapable of putting them there, but somehow our ancestors were able to do this.
To solve this mystery, we need to first understand that these three stones do not form the foundation of Baalbek, as is so often suggested. The trilithon stones lay end to end, or long ways, and are part of the narrow wall on the western end of the complex. They are most certainly not the foundation, nor do they constitute a platform, and it would be very awkward for a spaceship to land on top of them, considering the space on top is so narrow. Ancient Aliens tries to make it seem like no one knows the purpose for these stones, or why they had to be so heavy.
But if the moving, hoisting, and setting of such massive stones was so incredibly difficult, then who, or what, placed them there? And perhaps more importantly, why?
The truth is that the purpose for this wall is very well known by archaeologists. It was a retaining wall. Retaining wall technology really improved with the Greeks because of the importance of the amphitheater in their culture. Because most amphitheaters were sunken into the ground and surrounded by earth, they needed to construct retaining walls to hold back the soil. Then the Romans came along and basically perfected the practice. The rule of thumb in retaining walls, even today, is the bigger and heavier the stones, the better the retaining wall. Also, the stones needed to be in as big of sections as possible. In other words, huge sections of uncut stone. It's no coincidence that some of the biggest single stones in the ancient world, besides Baalbek, are also used in retaining walls, and by the Romans as well, as we will see. Retaining walls...
Now, Shizzy, you're an expert at retaining walls, right?
Oh, I've done a lot of them.
Yeah, I can tell by the look on your face that you fully knew what was going on there. They're nailing it, right? They're nailing it.
Yes. Yes.
Were especially important if there was a...
Is that Joe Biden?
No.
What the hell's he doing there? Dirty kids in there? It's like...
He'll sniff them out if there are.
I know. I think I smelled something down there. Yeah, okay.
A lot of soil erosion at the site, or if the platform you were trying to build was on a steep incline. At Baalbek, the platform was built right on the side of a huge hill, so for that reason alone, it would require a retaining wall if they intended to make a large level platform. But if you added to that a soil erosion problem, you would have two very good reasons for a huge retaining wall at Baalbek. So does the area around Baalbek have a problem with soil erosion? The answer is yes, probably one of the biggest in the world. You can see evidence of soil erosion all around the Baalbek site. The soil from the top of the hill has been sliding down the hill into the valley below for hundreds of years. One of the leading causes of soil erosion is deforestation. If an area that once had trees has been completely cleared of those trees, the rain no longer will have anything to slow down its velocity. Normally, the rain hits tree branches and the thick foliage that accumulates on the forest floor over time. Also, the soil is kept in check by the root systems of the trees, which hold the soil in place. Lebanon has a picture of a cedar tree on its flag. Their trees have been a symbol of pride for literally millennia, the so-called cedars of Lebanon. But the forests have disappeared long ago, as they were one of the only sites for timber in the ancient Near East, and it was massively deforested in ancient times. In fact, the soil shifting is just as bad today in the Bekaa Valley. The UN in 2006 proposed a series of solutions to deal with this now full-scale environmental disaster in the Baalbek region. Homes in the region are being abandoned as their foundations shift and they become inhabitable. But although these proposed solutions by the UN may be new, this problem is an ancient one the Romans would have been well aware of. The massive trilithon stones provided the weight needed to press down and secure the stones in the wall below. This is why you only see these huge stones on one side of Baalbek, the side where the steep slope is. The idea that these stones were part of a platform and were used as a landing pad is something that requires ignorance of the layout of the site in order to believe. Well, what about the age of this wall? Is it from the Roman period of construction, or is it from the pre-Roman Canaanite era? There is a lot of confusion about this point because there was indeed a very old pre-Roman temple on this site. The pre-Roman Canaanite temple was a pretty standard platform and altar, much like other sites built by the Canaanites, which were referred to in the Old Testament as high places. The original site was probably chosen by the Canaanites because it was indeed on a hill, as any good high place should be, but also because it was less than half a mile from the perfect stone quarry. The early versions of this temple, however, did not have a retaining wall. As the different groups added to the site over the years, the site changed drastically. The Romans alone spent 200 years doing construction at the site. Think of that. That would be like starting a construction project in 1812 that only just now came to completion. That's a long time to be working.
Yeah, that's the point I was making earlier. Go ahead, Shiz.
And that was, my wife being the person that she is, she knows quite a bit about, the Romans during the Republic, not so much the Roman Empire, but, prior to that. I mean, just because that was part of what she studied. And you have to consider that, like, the Colosseum was built over hundreds of years. And you can see if you look at the Colosseum, you'll see the different time periods of when it was built. And she pointed it out where you have, the different technology or the style as the Colosseum was built. And that's the same way with what is the large church, the Basilica. The Basilica was built over like 500 years or something ridiculous like that. I mean, it's not a quick build whenever they're building these things, because you get different architects that are working on it, and it just it's a very time consuming process. So whenever he's saying 200 years, that's actually pretty damn quick to have something built, on this scale. Because you don't have heavy machines. You have hundreds of thousands of workers that are cutting stone by hand to place, and they have to move it, and they have to place it, and you have to have everything down to the perfect measurements. And this is why you'll see a lot of these places in ruins, is because, well, that stone failed.
Yeah. Oh, that wars too. I want to put this into context real quick, because I think this is one of those things that we all kind of can skim past. Let's think about 200 years. First of all, you're going to have somebody who's the master architect here, right? Someone who really has the plan down. Okay, maybe it's several people, but they're not going to live 200 years. So there's going to be different teams that have worked on this, and they're not going to work for 100 years. They maybe work for, back then, how long did people live?
Like 40 years, but and they would go through multiple architects, and usually the architect that was finishing up, the final architect, more than likely can trace back who his master was. When I say master, the person that actually taught him his mentor, master craft, his mentor. Mm-hmm. You can trace his lineage back. It could have been his son, or it could have been someone that he adopted and taught his craft to over the years, and they would pass that information on to the next to keep that person's vision. Like if you look at the Pantheon, the Pantheon, like the Pantheon, and you see these wonderful engraved scripture up on the top, and everybody is like, oh, what does that say up there in Roman? And my wife goes, it says it was built by, and then names off the person. He basically just signed it. That's it. That's all it says on top of the Pantheon.
Yeah. Think about like the made by Shizzy.
Pretty much. That's basically what it says. Or it in general terms, it says built by, and then it has the architect's name.
Wow. So now we got 200 years. Okay, how many? We got 365 days in a year. How many hours in a day? How many? So we break it down to how much time. This thing looks perfectly reasonable now when you put that much time, effort, and generational architecture into it, that this could totally have been done, right? So it doesn't have to be done by aliens or anything like that.
Right.
And they weren't working 8-hour days, 5 days a week. It was much longer work days, much more time that they spent actually working on things. It wasn't like today, where it can take a lot longer to do something because you're not working 12, 14, 18-hour shifts all the time.
Right.
Okay, you got. I mean, it's like ants at work, right? The ants were just going crazy. All right, here we go.
Working on a project. So yes, Baalbek is built on a very old Canaanite altar to Baal, but the Trilithon stones were not part of that site, nor are they part of the foundation as is often claimed. They are part of a very necessary retaining wall. The question still remains, however, about the methods for moving and lifting these stones.
Some have suggested that this stone alone weighs in excess of 1,200 tons. How was it moved there? Because obviously it's situated on top of these stone rows that we can find down here, which means that this stone had to be lifted and then set on top of these stones down here.
So did the Romans have the technology to move and lift such stones? Well, all you have to do is look one country over to find out. About the same time the Romans were beginning their 200-year project at Baalbek, another project of similar magnitude was beginning by the Roman client king Herod the Great in 19 BC. Herod, using Roman techniques, renovated the Temple Mount to earn favor with the Jews, who viewed him as a Roman proxy, not a Jew. The expanded version of the temple was double the size of the original, but in order to make this expansion, he had to incorporate part of the hill to the northeast, which meant that he had to construct a massive retaining wall in order to hold back the force of the earth in order to build the massive platform. There is a portion of this retaining wall still standing today, and it contains the second largest set of single stones next to Baalbek. Just like Baalbek, there are several of these stones lined up to form the wall and to provide the weight and size needed to hold back the earth. They call the four largest stones the master course. The weight of the heaviest one is 630 tons, only a little over 100 tons less than Baalbek's biggest stone. And no one denies that these stones were cut, moved, and lifted to perfection using Roman and local techniques. As a side note, it's tempting to think that the holes visible in these stones were used for lifting, but these holes were cut after the stones were placed. They were used to hold plaster in place for certain water projects and only go a few inches deep. Anyway, is it really logical to believe that the Romans could cut, move, and lift 630-ton blocks for retaining walls just fine, but if you added another 100 tons, it would require alien technology? We know that the Romans, about this same time, had taken a liking to Egyptian obelisks. They started dragging these obelisks back to Rome in large numbers, and Rome was hundreds of miles by land and sea from Egypt, whereas Baalbek was less than a mile from the quarry. Some of these obelisks were almost 500 tons, so the Romans had a lot of opportunities to get good at moving stones about the same size and shape of the Trilithon stones. There are even Roman descriptions of the process of moving obelisks by Marcellinus Comus, as well as reliefs such as the one on the bottom of the Theodosius obelisk in Istanbul. The ancient Roman writings of Marcus Vitruvius Pollio describe in detail many of the Roman technological advantages, like pulleys, which would reduce the force needed by half for each pulley used. He even described their ingenious way of moving stones by constructing huge oak wheels on either end of the block, whether they were round like pillars or huge rectangular stones like the trilithons. They would then be pulled by oxen to the site. So what about the lifting of the trilithon stones at Baalbek? Some make the point that the trilithon stones do not have Lewis holes in them like many of the other Roman stones at Baalbek. Lewis holes is the name for the holes that the Romans would drill in the stones for lifting with their cranes. Yes, the Romans had cranes, and although their cranes only had a 5-ton capacity, often they would combine many of them together, which would obviously give them a greater capacity. So why don't these 3 stones contain these holes, like all the rest of the stones at Baalbek? Well, first of all, I wouldn't be so sure that they don't. No one has ever seen what is on the ends of these stones. It may very well be that they decided against a straight-up or dead lift of the trilithon stones because of their weight, and instead decided to lift up only one side of the stone. You would really only need to lift it high enough and long enough to get even the smallest brace underneath it, because at that point you would have a number of mechanical advantages and therefore options. For example, watch as this man makes a Stonehenge in his backyard all by himself using a simple counterweight method.
I've tried to do this without any mechanical machinery at all. I've used mostly sticks and stones for my equipment. No pulleys, no hoists, no metal levers. Just try to use gravity too, I believe is my favorite tool.
The first goal is getting this block 3 feet off the ground.
In order to move it up to this point, I just rock the block back and forth, adding weight to that end, and that opens a gap on this side, and just slide a board in. Then I add the weight to that end. There she goes. And slide a board in on this end.
This shoring box acts like a jack, slowly raising the block.
But it's not really even necessary for them to have been lifted. A French paper written by Jean-Pierre Adam meticulously details how the stones could have been moved using the specifications provided by Marcus Vitruvius Polio by constructing roads underneath the stones on rollers, and the roads were raised to lead to the exact place of their placement, which was easy at Baalbek because of the terrain, so it wouldn't require any lifting, and then using man-powered drums and a system of capstans to pull the stones along the road. This method would have only required 144 workers to accomplish. It's also helpful for people to remember that the largest stone ever moved in the world is the so-called Thunderstone in Russia, moved in the 1700s using no modern equipment. This stone is 1.5 tons larger than the largest trilithon stone, and we know that moving it didn't require any alien technology. Well, what about this claim?
What's really interesting about Baalbek is it's always been known as the landing place. There's an actual text from Sumerian times called the Epic of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh actually claims to have seen rockets descend and ascend from Baalbek, the landing place.
These claims come directly from the writings of Zechariah Sitchin, and they are totally untrue. Baalbek was not called the landing place, and the Epic of Gilgamesh never speaks of rockets ascending and descending anywhere in it.
Yeah. Well, Zacharias Sitchin is another one of those guys that are all these ancient alien disclosure people like worship this dude, especially the people on Coast to Coast. George Norrie loves him. I love that guy. I think he's right on. You can hear him saying that guy's got a great radio voice, by the way. But yeah, Zacharias Sitchin is like their god. You haven't ever heard of him before.
If you're going to make these assertions, I would want the passage. I want to see the passage in Gilgamesh that names Baalbek specifically. I'm naturally skeptical that there is such a passage, but if you're going to make this claim, you have to be able to establish with certainty, not even just a general region. You have to establish with certainty that these are the stones, or that these stones are what is being referred to in any given text.
Sitchin, when making this claim in his book, never tells the reader where they can find this in the Epic of Gilgamesh. This is probably because it makes it harder for the reader to check his facts.
Yeah, I have personally found the writings of Sitchin very frustrating from the perspective of a scholar and an academic, which is what I am. It's sort of reflexively what I look for. It's very hard to follow his trail because he just doesn't cite sources. Even if he cites a source.
Actually, that book was written by Bill Cooper.
Mm-hmm.
William Cooper, I guess.
For instance, an ancient text. He doesn't give you sort of the chapter and verse. He doesn't give you the tablet numbers, the line numbers. And I have to look at it and say, it's either really lazy or he doesn't want you to be able to check up on him. It's one or the other.
I will link the actual section of the Epic as well as a link to the online resources to check the Sumerian text for yourselves at the website ancientaliensdebunked.com. Nowadays,
yeah, the numbers he's flashing up there, by the way, are the reference points. So you can actually go to this website and look up the number you want to look and get a background on the information, even deeper dive on that. So that's what they're there for.
All the Sumerian tablets, including their own
this guy did a great job.
are searchable online. Yes, the Sumerians wrote their own extensive and detailed dictionaries, so we don't have to trust Sitchin or anyone else. We can basically just ask the Sumerians what they thought a word meant. And it becomes painfully obvious to anyone that cares enough to look that Sitchin was at best totally incompetent as a translator. And at worst, a scam artist. See Sitchin.
Yes.
Nailed it.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Yeah, I mean, we actually went to Belize, my wife and I, and visited Mayan ruins, which a lot of the whole area is, Mayan ruins, and our guide is like 3/4 Mayan, just because Mayans still exist. people think that they disappeared like the way of the Druids at Stonehenge, but no, they're still around, just smaller population. And he was showing, one of the writings in the text, and he said the way that you read this text, it's not the same, because each portion of it leads to a different portion of it, and if you take one little piece of it out, it can change all of the meaning, and it was just a rubbing that they found on the bottom of this like archway that had fallen, and so it was preserved from rain and soil erosion, all that kind of stuff. When they flipped it over, they found that there was writing, what would have been the face of it, and it's just basically gives like a lineage detail. We actually have a rubbing that hangs in my hallway in a closet, or not a closet, but in a hallway. It's pretty cool. Just the way that things were written, like if you're looking at those little passages, they're all upright. And so each little section tells a little bit about, so-and-so on, and some of it will actually give a date, and some of it will, give a time, a place, who the person was. I mean, because whenever you're doing hieroglyphics, you have to be very detailed about what you're going to say whenever you're writing it out, because you don't have long text because you're using images. So,
Yep, exactly. Hey, while we're taking a quick stop here, if you're in the chat and you're enjoying the show, please hit the thumbs up and the like button for me. A thumbs up on Rumble and like on YouTube.
Yeah, I saw
for me. That'd be great.
I saw whenever I first jumped in here that you had like 235 people watching.
Yeah, it's kind of a carryover from our last show together last Saturday night. We did hippie culture. Yeah, the channel is just growing in popularity. It's contagious. Truth is contagious.
Aliens, all of them.
ShizzyWhizNut.com to begin your journey in losing any confidence in the so-called translations of Zecharia Sitchin. In conclusion, the Trilithon stones are part of a necessary retaining wall, not a foundation, and such walls were common to the Greeks and Romans. The retaining wall was not part of the simple, original, much smaller temple at Baalbek, and we know from other retaining walls of similar size, built by the Romans at the same time and in the same area, that they were more than capable of moving and placing stones of that size and shape, also evidenced by their ability to move obelisks. This is especially true if you gave them over 200 years in which to do it. We will look at Incan megalithic sites like Machu Picchu all in one segment, because Incan stonemasonry was all done more or less the same way. In regard to Incan building, Ancient Aliens focuses most of its attention on the curved or beveled edges of the stones. They say that it looks like the edges of these stones were melted. Notice as we listen to them build the case for this, that the reason they believe this is true is based entirely on the way the stones look.
There are signs in many of these stones that show very large amounts of thermal heat have been applied to mold the stones in such a way that they fit perfectly. And so it really does raise a lot of questions.
If you look at the style the Sacsayhuaman wall was built, the blocks look as if they've been molded like putty. If you can mold stone into place, then all of a sudden, as crazy as this sounds, it makes more sense.
Now, melting granite...
okay, but explain how there were aliens in Vegas where they also built a pyramid. Looks like they were looking for a landing spot. Therefore, pyramids must be landing spots. Yes, perfect logic there.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Any other stone, and reshaping it would leave unmistakable evidence in and on the stones themselves. In other words, if the rocks were melted, it would be easily provable. It would not be a matter of what the stones look like. It would be a simple yes or no question. Ancient Aliens skips this step of proving or disproving their theory. Instead, they assume that the rocks were melted based on the look of the stones and move on to the step of trying to figure out who would have the technology to melt stones.
I don't even think they look melted.
Which I use for some.
No,
they don't. No, not at all. Not at all. There's a little bit of flat Earth logic going on there.
What? The Earth's not flat.
My
My floor's flat. Earth's got to be flat if my floor's flat.
Yeah. Otherwise, you just fly off into space, right?
I know. It's so crazy.
I know.
Sometimes shaping granite, and I mean it generates a temperature of in excess of 3,000 degrees. 3,000 degrees. That's a lot.
When we look back at
Thank you.
we see a technology that they couldn't possibly know. There's only two possibilities of that. Either God did it, which we really don't think happened, or some high-tech civilization from another planet came and showed them how to do it. Then,
So what were our choices again? God and aliens?
God and aliens? Man.
Surely it couldn't have been God. Had to be the aliens.
I'm so surprised.
took their materials and tools and went back home.
I think there's at least one more possibility that Mr. Dunn may have missed. Every shaped stone at any Incan site has what archaeologists call pit marks or pit scars. They occur when stone hammers are used to quarry and shape the stone. In addition, archaeologists have found a huge number of Incan stone hammers at the quarries, and almost uniquely to the Incans, they are found at the building sites too. Because the Incans only rough cut the stones at the quarries, they did the finish work on site, so the stones would perfectly fit the stones around them. Well, how did the Incans accomplish these beveled edges? They used a smaller gauge stone hammer for the outer section. The evidence for this can be seen on every single stone that has these edges. You can see that the pit scars are much more numerous and smaller on the edges, showing that more blows with a smaller stone was used to achieve the detail work. Another reason that this is no mystery to archaeologists is because there are a large number of stones in various stages of construction in the ancient Incan quarries. These stones reveal that indeed the Incan stonemasons were using some of the most basic tools, even for their time. If you would like to learn more about the details of this, I'll link you to some peer-reviewed papers that can tell you more than you'd ever want to know, including details of experiments done. For example, a single scientist in 90 minutes accomplished similar cuts with similar tools. And all of this makes what Dunn says here one of the most off-the-wall things ever said in the Ancient Alien series.
I can't help but think that whoever was behind this thought the process through from beginning to end. They didn't quarry the rock and then decide, how the heck are we going to transport this? They knew from beginning to end what needed to be done with
kind of like the people who wrote this show.
Technology they were going to use.
Yeah.
In industry today, there's a kind of an adage, keep it simple, stupid.
Based on his experience, Mike Dunn believes the simplest way to build the Great Walls of Machu Picchu would have been to transport small rocks to the site, then melt them, and use molds to fashion the exact size and shape needed.
So he says it's more...
Very dramatic, isn't it?
I'm just picturing melting granite and then shaping it.
It must be done this way. It's like oh, good times.
More simple to melt the granite, something so complicated that we don't really even know how to do it today. Is that really the most simple solution he could come up with? And then to say that they poured the melted rocks into a mold. I mean, look at these walls. Can anyone look at this and say, yeah, that looks like they were made from the same mold? These are not exactly...
I was going to say, if it's a mold, why wouldn't they all be the same?
Right? Like our house. I don't think they have a brick house, you know?
No,
It's like...
let's create a mold for every different rock that we're going to put up there. I think we should just triple the work.
Absolutely. Well, this is how we do it in outer space.
Well,
you know?
well, the mold is no good after you use it once.
It gets all moldy.
What is the mold made out of?
It's just a wooden board. See, they pour it, and the wooden board burns away, and then you're left with it in the mold.
There you go. Man, I tell you, man, there's this thing it's called too much time in your hands, I guess.
Yes.
Let's go on with this masterpiece.
Bricks of the same size and shape, unless he wants to say that they made a new mold for every block, in which case we would go well out of the range of this being the most simple solution. As far as how the Incans moved the stones into place, They left us a lot of evidence behind in the form of ramps. There are Incan ramps all over the place, still in existence today, in the quarries and at the building sites. The Incans had one of the most massive workforces in all the ancient world. They were like the Roman Empire of the West, and they had an absolutely huge labor force at the ready for these types of projects. So we know these rocks were not melted and put into molds as Ancient Aliens tells us. We actually know exactly how they made these rounded edges because of the pit marks left behind, as well as the huge number of stone hammers found in the quarries. There are no mysteries that require alien input with Incan stonework.
You know, one thing to think about. I was just thinking about. I just came into my head. You know, I do believe that there is some truth to the saying, idle hands are the devil's plaything. As in, you know, you've got that many people sitting around. There's no wars going on. They need something to do. I mean, I got all the food. Everybody's all good. You know, we need something to do. Let's build something, because otherwise, y'all bitches getting in all kinds of trouble around here. You know.
I've always been the firm belief that the devil's hands are a plaything.
The idle hands are the devil's plaything, right? So
sorry.
Oh yeah, no worries. That's all good.
Many people are familiar with these images of stone heads, called moai by the locals. Ancient Aliens tells us that nothing is really known about them.
There's a lot known about
How
them.
in the heck did they make these? Where did they come from? And how did they move them? Nobody has the answer.
This isn't true at all. For instance, we know exactly how they were cut and shaped, because the construction of the moai was abandoned abruptly. So there are plenty of examples of moai in various stages of development. Also, the stone tools that they used to pound out the relatively soft volcanic rock were found all over the quarries. Here's a clip of one of the locals explaining to his grandson how the moai were built.
He thinks that 20 people carved this moai over a period of time of 5 to 6 years to this stage. This is our sections of people who were, given as your assignment. This is your section. You can carve, and you can see different, ways of doing it, and you can clearly see the talking marks and how the people were carving and going in and make these deep cuts in the rock like this, that.
The channels reached around and eventually formed a boat-like keel until the statue could be snapped off and fully extracted.
Ancient Aliens spends most of its time here discussing the moving of the moai, and it's interesting the angle that they take, because it seems that they are aware that there have been many successful experiments moving moai with wooden sleds and minimal workers. So Ancient Aliens has to do what they do best: create a false dilemma.
But there is a unique problem with the idea of moving moai with sleds or rollers.
All right, hold on. Anybody want to guess what it is? Chat, you're in on this. Anybody want to guess? What's the false dilemma? I'm gonna guess. I don't remember this. Okay, I saw this a long time ago, 10 years ago at least, I think. My guess is they're gonna say that there's no trees to create the rollers around, because if you look around, there's not a lot of trees in the background. They're going to say that they didn't have enough trees. I could be wrong. I don't know. But for some reason, just the juxtaposition of this scene here kind of makes me think that's the problem is.
I was going to say the trees, or that the trees were not big enough. That for some reason they were too small and just kept snapping, so they couldn't use them.
Just.
Well, if they do say trees, there's an easy solution to it. You just pick up the ones in the back and move them to the front as you go.
There you go. Let's see.
When you go to Easter Island, you don't get the impression they had enough wood to have rollers. And in fact, in the 1700s, the first 4 expeditions to Easter Island never really saw a tree. And so that's the real mystery of Easter Island. How can you move a multi-ton statue if you have no trees for?
I think the real mystery is how'd you get your eyebrows that long? The girl up like that. That's amazing.
Hey.
Rollers.
So they say
Yours
there are
look good.
currently no trees
Nice
on
and
Easter
green.
Island. Therefore, they assume there were never any trees on Easter Island, and therefore, well, aliens. The problem with this is that there used to be a lot of trees on Easter Island, which we now know because of extensive pollen samples taken from the crater lakes as well as other methods. In fact, the very reason there are no trees on Easter Island now is probably because they used all of them while moving and lifting over 1,000 moais over hundreds of years. In other words,
Or
they used all the trees.
or it's a possibility that's like New York, where you don't see a whole lot of trees in the cities. They just cleared out the land.
Yep. See, Printer God says,
Well,
no, duh. Go ahead, Caitlin.
Oh, I was just going to say running out of trees could explain why so many were left unfinished.
Oh, yeah.
A
That's a
big
great point as
storm
well.
rolls in, wipes everything out. Hurricane, typhoon, depends on what part of the world you're in. Could have easily hit the island and just wiped a lot of it out. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that they had to have that aha moment, right? Like where they're like, dang, we got all these great statues, but no shade. So we got a place to get out of the sun. Oh, man. Peter God says, no, duh, Easter Island was invented after Easter became a holiday. Therefore, no one worked on the island because time off and such. Gotcha. Yeah, that's a good point, too.
Well, and T-Rex says, and therefore, well, aliens.
Yeah, therefore aliens. Mm-hmm. Oh, look at the doggy.
Puppy.
Who's that? Who's that?
This is
What?
Buddy.
Hey, buddy.
Oh,
Of course that comes
Bell's
from.
mad.
Oh, how many dogs do you have?
2 indoors, 3 outdoors.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
Yeah, she
Dog lovers.
She keeps the big ones outside so that way they can eat the small rodents that might be just creeping around. Maybe just catch a couple of deer.
Keep the coyotes away too.
Keep the coyotes away, keep the possums away, keep the armadillos away. Yeah, we got a whole bunch of creatures that come crawling up onto the land, and those big dogs out there don't really like letting them come near us.
Nice.
What kind of dogs are your big dogs?
They're Heinz 57, to be honest. So, like, one of them his mom showed up in our backyard on like November 15th one year, right? And she was a pit bull of some sort, but clearly had been used in a dangerous situation, unfortunately. And I think she was a breeding dog and all of these things. She had a huge gash on her shoulder, so we nursed her back to health. And in 45 days, on January 1st, she had 1 puppy. And so we kept the puppy and we gave the mama out to one of our dear friends. And then the other 2 are like poodle mixes.
Cool. Let's all say they're doing their job out there.
Yep. They're good.
The thing about Easter Island is regarding soil erosion. If you take a land that once had a lot of trees and cut them all down, then you will have a massive soil erosion problem. This is because there would be no more root systems to hold the soil in place. Also, the rains no longer have anything to stop their velocity. The soil erosion at Easter Island is so notorious that if you type soil erosion into a search engine, you will see that the Wikipedia page has a picture of Easter Island. Some of the moai actually have full bodies. They're not just heads. But because of soil erosion, even in a very short time, they have been covered up to their necks in soil. This is a direct result of the land being completely deforested. So we know for sure how these moai were cut and shaped. That is, with simple tools which are found all over the quarries. And we know that if they had trees on Easter Island, then there are no problems with moving them and prying them into place. And Easter Island used to have a lot of trees before their fascination with creating moai exhausted their supply.
You know, that had to it kind of puts a damper on Easter Island, doesn't it? I feel like this is kind of a win fail situation. you know, they got a lot of nice statues, and then they kept everybody busy. But then all of a sudden they got erosion problems. They don't got any shade. There's no trees left. I guess there's not a lot of birds around either. I mean, it just it seems like they're like, we did it. That's going to have ruined the island.
Well, and that's one of the things that the Mayans had sort of perfected, which I was interested to find out, is there was a particular ruler of the Mayans that found that they were wearing out the land, like things wouldn't grow. And instead of blaming the gods and doing sacrifices, he came up with this brilliant idea to plant different things at different times move across the lagoon and actually grow things there. And then they would build a small city for that, and then they would come back, whenever it would, and they would just fluctuate every few years between places of where they would actually grow their crops. It was about the time that I think it was the Spaniards came in and brought in slaves for sugar, to basically have their sugar manufacturing. That they just deforested most of the land, and then just the Mayans just moved out of their cities and just left it behind. Was like this, they've totally destroyed. We don't have any fertile land because they just didn't follow the simple procedures that we set in place, and then the jungles took over. So that's a lot of what will happen with Easter Island. All you got to do is just plant a few trees, and Easter Island will be up and booming again.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious why they haven't replanted the trees. I don't know. But hey, they got a lot of nice looking statues, though.
Yeah.
Which will eventually be covered up by erosion.
Right. Yeah. Pascal's rocket.
Arguably the most remarkable Mayan artifact ever found, the stone sarcophagus lid of King Pakal has produced considerable controversy. Mainstream scholars believe the depiction is of King Pakal on a journey to the underworld. But ancient astronaut theorists believe the king is portrayed seated at the controls of a spacecraft and have dubbed him the Palenque astronaut.
He appears to be going into space. He's the original rocket man. They're manipulating his spacecraft going into space.
We have maintained for a very long time that the depiction here is of King Pakal sitting in some type of a spacecraft, because he is at an angle like modern day astronauts upon liftoff. He's manipulating some controls right here. He has some type of a breathing apparatus or some type of a telescope in front of his face. His feet are on some type of a pedal. And down here, you have something that looks like an exhaust with flames.
So take it from the guy with the fake tan that there's a rocket man.
Yeah. I'm still not sure what he does.
Well, he tans a lot, and then he spikes his hair up and just makes it look like he's like the Nutty Professor.
Right? Does he have a job? I mean, like, how did this guy get on the show?
I don't even think that's his real name.
I'm about to look him up while we're doing this. I think there's a little bit of information out there about him. I don't know.
My real name isn't ShizzyWhizNut.
Beginning. Eric von Däniken believes this to be one of his best pieces of evidence.
You see his upper hand, he's manipulating some controls. From the lower hand, he's turning something on. The heel of his left foot is on a kind of pedal, and outside of the capsule, you see a leaking flat. This is incredible. This is absolutely a proof for extraterrestrials.
The theory rests on the idea that the Mayans were not depicting their usual symbols here, but were trying to realistically depict a rocket with Pakal as its pilot. I think the best thing I can do for you here is to clearly explain what the Mayanists and other scientists who specialize in Mayan culture and artwork believe this scene is depicting. As Ancient Alien said, archaeologists believe this scene is depicting the moment of Pakal's death and his descent into the underworld. Let me show you why they believe that. The most famous symbol in this picture is that of the World Tree, which, if you believe Ancient Aliens, would make up the entire hull of the rocket. It's hard to overemphasize the importance of the World Tree in Mayan mythology. The idea was that the World Tree extended into the heavens with its branches, and its roots extended into the underworld. So it was a symbol of the bridge between the underworld, heaven, and earth. When it is depicted, it almost always has the double-headed vision serpent on its branches, just like it is depicted here on Pakal's lid. The vision serpent was believed to live at the center of the world. Thus, it is depicted just above the underworld and just below the heavens. In its top branches is the celestial bird, which is seen a little more clearly in other World Tree depictions like this one. But on Pakal's lid, you can see it's clearly depicting the same bird. The celestial bird represented the heavens, and thus was pictured on top of the World Tree. What Ancient Alien says is the exhaust or fire from the rocket's takeoff is the roots of the world tree extending into the underworld, which is not just typical for the depictions of the world tree, it's pretty much a requirement. In the underworld, we see a picture of the Mayan sun monster, which Pikal is riding into the underworld. The idea was that every time the sun set, it was actually traveling into the underworld, where it would die, like everything else in the underworld. You can even see the bottom half of the sun's face was a skeleton, while the top half still had flesh and had not yet died. This too is a common theme showing the moment of transition. So Pikal is hitching a ride on the sun into the underworld. Even the so-called smoke is easily explained when you understand Mayan symbols. In Mayan art, whenever you see a so-called traveler, which is a person in transition from one world to the next, there must be something that is making that travel possible. Sometimes it's a twisted umbilical cord, but almost always it's a serpent, often a double-headed serpent. In other words, being in the mouths of double-headed serpents was a symbol of transition from one world to the next. You can see that the so-called smoke is actually the traditional serpent's beard, which appears on almost every depiction of a serpent in Mayan art. Now that you have an idea about what the scholars believe about this, let's look at some of Ancient Alien's specific claims.
He's manipulating some controls right here.
They say his hands are manipulating some controls, but if you look closely, his right hand isn't touching anything at all, and the thing to its right is not connected to the tree any more than any of the other floating design elements in the picture. His left hand could be said to be manipulating controls more than his right, but you would have to say that all these marks on the tree are controls too, which in reality is probably the bark of the world tree, which was modeled after the ceiba tree, which had a very unique bark and thus was usually depicted in some way or another in world tree
pictures
art.
of those.
The odd position of
Oh, wow.
Pakal's hands in this image is really what all the fuss is about. In the 1970s video refutation of the ancient astronaut theories, the Mayan expert in that film made the point that the hands in Mayan art are often depicted in delicate positions.
The Maya like to show hands in rather delicate gestures.
Such gestures are common in Mayan art. There are similar examples on the side of the slab.
As far as the claim about his foot being on a type of pedal, I would have to say that if that is how aliens design pedals, then we are far more advanced in pedal technology than they are, because that may be the worst angle to put any kind of foot.
But of course, we had to have something going
Plus,
for us.
there are other reliefs of Mayans in the underworld on similar slabs with their feet in similar positions, but without the rocket. Well, what about this so-called breathing tube for his nose? Well, it doesn't connect to anything, and if you look closely, the thing it could potentially connect to is also represented on the other side of the lid, and is clearly a stylistic element of the vision serpent. What it actually is a nose piercing, particularly a bone.
Here, an earring suspended from a pierced ear, a nose plug, which has the elements of death because it takes the form of a fleshless bone.
Finally, consider the context that we find this image. It's on a coffin lid, so the mainstream view is perfectly in line with that, and the whole concept was common in Mayan burials. It would have been a strange thing for them to all of a sudden abandon their usual symbolic artwork to depict a rocket on a coffin lid. The fact is that the symbols on the sarcophagus lid are really consistently used. Often the symbols are even explained in the extensive Mayan writings. These symbols fit perfectly with what we know about their beliefs about the world and the afterlife.
Want to hear something interesting?
Sure do.
So, I didn't know this until we were told. Mayans, whenever they would build a house, the father would build a house. He would have a family. His son, whenever the father would die, the father would be buried in his house, and the son would build his house on top of his father's house. And so, as they built it, they tended to take a temple look.
Ah, that's awesome.
Yes.
That's actually really practical thinking too. I mean, it kind of like it's reusable. It's like really sustainable. It's sustainable design. There you go. Maybe we should all start doing that. Who knows? you can visit Dad anytime you want to. Just go to the basement.
Well, they didn't really go to the basement. They just used it as a foundation. So that's that, you know, and there's a lot written about that in Mayan culture about using the bones of the father to build upon.
That really is. I like the symbolism in that. I like the way that you know, because it's so true in so many ways. You know,
it
really
is.
Oh, I love these. These are like one of my favorites right here. Because hold on, let's get into it first.
The Nazca Lines of Peru have been an important part of the ancient astronaut theory since its beginning. Originally, von Daniken claimed that the lines were kind of a UFO runway, or a type of alien airport, where the alien craft landed and took off. When challenged by Carl Sagan and others on this point in an early documentary.
So many things wrong with that right off the bat.
God. Von Daniken kind of backtracked on this and said that he meant that the lines were created as a result of the spacecraft landing.
I never said that the extraterrestrial needed runways with concrete or something like this. My idea, which I developed in my second book and also in the book In Search of Ancient Gods, the picture book, was that some vehicle was coming down, not an interstellar spaceship, simply a small vehicle, and landing with an effect maybe even of the air cushion system. So they don't need landing tracks, but simply by the landing itself, some sand and stones are blown away, and you have a simple track on the ground. And after maybe a few hours or a few days, they start again, maybe in another direction, you have a second track, the take-off track.
In other words, he's saying that the spacecraft dragged on the surface of the ground as they landed, and that the lines are therefore the unintentional result of spacecraft landing. For the Ancient Alien series, however, it seems that they are back to claiming it was an airport.
The lines look like airstrips. They start abruptly, they end abruptly.
Looking at Nazca from the air, it looks like an airport. And it really does, because you have all these bands, wide bands that look like airstrips that are laid on top of each other, but you also have these gigantic, long, straight lines that go for miles and miles over valleys, over mountains.
Either explanation seems to fall short.
By the way, I just want to point out, these guys right here are the producers of the show. I'm reading up behind the scenes here on this is Giorgio.
Yeah.
Takalis.
Yeah.
And this is Eric Van Daniken, right?
Oh,
yep. So that's who these guys are. These are the producers of the show. Now they seem like they're real experts, right? But this is their theory. And they have a very interesting background. And he didn't really I don't think he actually graduated from college. He's definitely doesn't have an architectural degree from what I'm reading right here. I think he was into a sports medicine degree. He has a sports medicine degree. That doesn't mean you can't be good at something. I'm just pointing out, most archaeologists have a archaeology.
He got to deal with the History Channel, so he must be good at something.
Yeah, he's actually just a kind of a show writer, but he has really taken this Ancient Aliens thing and pulled off the grift of a lifetime, because I'm sure he's loaded.
Dude, probably not, because he might just be, because you can, if you're just producing this kind of show and you go around and you talk to a few other alien commenters, no real proof behind it. You don't really have to do anything except, he's basically done a YouTube channel that's, on the History Channel.
Yeah. Well, he's been at it since 2002. So like he's literally up until last year, he appeared as a TV documentary, archive footage, Les Secrets des Miracles de Fatima. I don't know what that means, but I'm trying to read it like I do.
As a person with a criminal justice degree, I'm somewhat of an expert in ancient tribology, symbology, clearly.
Well, luckily we have someone with a criminal justice degree on the panel right here.
Yeah.
Katelyn Collins has recently just graduated with that, and she actually is starting a new job as a legal assistant.
How's that going? Didn't you already start?
Today was my first day. I've got work tomorrow morning.
I understand if you can't make the whole thing. In fact, I it's pretty long. If we make it, we make it. If wherever we stop, and I can always just throw the link out for people. So
yeah, I'll be jumping out of here at midnight, because I do have an early day tomorrow. So
yeah, that's usually about the time we kind of cut the show off. So we'll probably go till then. So don't expect us to try to get through the whole thing. We could do it part 2. I'll tell you what, I'll put it out in the chat. If the chat wants a part 2, we'll do a part 2. If not, I'll just throw you the link and you can watch the rest on your own. But
I think you should do a part 2, because that the talk behind it is what we come for. We We don't come
Absolutely.
over here for the.
Okay, if
for
I do
the
a part 2,
doc.
you guys got to come back for it, though. We got to have the crew here for it.
I can do that. I can do
All
that.
right, all right. That's what we'll do. All right, we'll do that. And action.
Of explaining why these lines are sometimes several miles long, one of them being almost 15 miles long. It would be a pretty inefficient spacecraft if it took 15 miles for it to take off, or, in the alternate explanation, if it needed to drag on the ground for 15 miles before it stopped.
It's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Stop. Hit the brakes. I can't get back to the control room. The door's locked. How do I get in? We're still sliding. It's like,
Maybe we shouldn't have made these wheels out of that melted granite that we're using.
right. Charlie, did you check the brakes before we left? Because I got nothing here. Get down there and fix it. But we got 15 miles to go.
I mean, you know how far 15 miles is. I mean, that's a long freaking way.
And for like an hour.
I mean, well, if you're traveling 15 miles an hour, then yeah, it would take you an hour. But I'm just saying, you're coming in at any sort of speed. You definitely wouldn't need brakes. Just the friction alone would slow you down.
Well, not if the metal on the saucer was really slick, right? It might actually just keep it. It just slides right across the grass. It's like,
well, that's how they take off too. You know,
yeah.
Get a running start.
Are you gonna pull up or what? You know, we're still going here. Come on, we're giving them a show, guys.
This is a bit of a rough ride here.
It's for the little people here, you know, for those humans. They need some entertainment. They got nothing to do.
or maybe that they had those roads for the emergency vehicles.
Hey, man. Maybe that's where everybody lined up and waved as they were coming in. I don't know.
Out there with the little cones.
We will look more into this later. In the meantime, I want to look at
Little-
what I
little
think
alien
may be the
headlights.
most ridiculous claim of the entire Ancient Alien series.
At Nazca, entire mountaintops have been removed. I mean, this all requires machining. And I'm not talking, you know, a little wheelbarrow and a pick. I'm talking sophisticated machinery, because we today would also need sophisticated machinery in order to achieve such feats.
Therefore, not because we have it, because we need it.
They're not just plateaus.
You know, aliens.
Aliens.
You notice as the series goes on, his hair gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
When his tan gets darker and darker.
Yeah, that's progress, folks. You know, when your hair is getting bigger, your tan's getting darker, you're going places.
I will say, I looked it up. This guy does not have a YouTube channel yet, that I can tell. So let's hope he doesn't find YouTube.
Well, he started it in 2002.
Yeah. I pulled up some stuff. I'll put it in the private chat for you guys.
Okay.
Oh, no.
Yeah, here we go. Let's start this.
They are claiming that this mountain in the Nazca region has been artificially sheared off. But what they are referring to is a plateau. Plateaus and mesas are naturally flat on top. They occur all over the world, and geologists know exactly how they form. In light of that, it makes them spending so much time on this point kind of funny.
It took Katelyn like 13 seconds to call it a plateau.
Right?
Beautiful.
She's smart, dude.
I think that's like basic 4th grade geography, too. That's not hard.
But aliens.
That's funny. That's funny.
One of the most craziest pictures I made about Nazca.
The crazy thing is, the rubble, the remains of that summit or that mountaintop, gone. It's nowhere. It's not in the valley down below. It's nowhere in the region. What happened to it?
Okay, moving on to the lines. NASA doesn't just have straight...
Artark, see that mountain range right there? Flatten it. We need a place to land. Artark. Fire the lasers.
Oh my God.
Lines. There are also several images of animals, such as monkeys, spiders, fish, jaguars, llamas, lizards, and dogs. Contrary to what Ancient Alien says, the way that they were made is very well known. In fact, It's ridiculously simple. They simply moved the reddish-brown iron oxide-covered pebbles that cover the surface of the Nazca Desert out of the way. When the gravel is moved, the layer underneath is exposed, which is much lighter, and the contrast of the two colors creates the Nazca line. If you were in the Nazca Desert, you could create a Nazca line by running your finger over the surface of the ground. It would probably stay there for hundreds of years, too, because the Nazca Desert is one of the driest places in the world, and it almost never receives rain. If it did, the lines would have been washed away long ago because they are so superficial. Well, if these lines aren't an alien airport, what are they? What is known are the basic beliefs about religion in the ancient Nazca culture. Likely related to the arid and extreme nature of their environment, Nazca religious beliefs were centered around agriculture and fertility. Much of the Nazca art depicts powerful nature gods, such as the mythical killer whale, the harvesters, and the mythical spotted cat, etc. Essentially, they worshipped gods represented by animals, which they thought.
Oh, right there. Pinner God says, I've been to Nazca and Machu Picchu. Spent years there. Inca and Nazca is nearby. Oh, sorry. Ica and Nazca is nearby. It's known for its wines and other plains architecture. The lines were artificial irrigation routes. There you go. Take it from someone who knows the locals.
Controlled things like water and crops. I might add that they were super serious about this too. So serious that they decapitated lots and lots of humans in order to appease these nature gods. I think it's fair to say that the Nazca people were obsessed with beheadings. On their pottery, it depicts crops growing from severed heads, and there are other things too that show the connections that they believed severed heads had to good crops. All that to say that these people were dead serious about farming. And if you're serious about farming, you must also be serious about water. And if you are farming in the desert, then it's off the charts how serious about water you would be. I mention this because it helps to explain what the Nazca lines likely are. First, let's take the depictions of animals. For the most part, all of these animals can also be found depicted in Nazcan pottery. They were the Nazca gods of water and fertility. If you asked an ancient Nazcan what they believed about the world and how it worked, they would likely say something like, we take hallucinogenic drugs, we cut off a lot of heads, all in hopes that the monkey spirit will help us have some good crops this year. That just isn't what you would expect to hear if these people were smack dab in the middle of a massive mining operation conducted by UFO flying spacemen. There should be some hint of that in their mythology, if it were true. But if it is true, they apparently couldn't have cared less based on their lack of any indication in their belief system. Moving on to the actual lines. In order to understand these, we need to know a few more facts. One aspect of the Nazcan religion was huge pilgrimages. Massive amounts of Nazcans would walk to certain holy sites throughout their year. There they would participate in big religious events. The main place that they walked to was a place called Cahuachi, very near the Nazca lines. For a long time, archaeologists thought that it was the biggest Nazcan city ever found. But slowly they realized that it was never a place of permanent residence, but was only a place for all the pilgrims to converge. And what they did after they all walked there was, well, do some more walking. These walks are called processions when they are in a religious context. In the Nazcan culture, everyone got together and walked on these specific paths. The idea was that by getting everyone together and doing these rituals, they could appease these water gods. And even when the straight lines were not directly above underground water reservoirs, they were leading to mountains and other sites which were associated with the water gods, where the people would then worship those gods. So, in conclusion, the mountains weren't shaved off. The idea that it was an airport makes no logical sense, and the symbols and rituals which were a huge part of the Nazcan culture more than explain the so-called Nazca lines.
There you go.
Early in the 20th century, tomb robbers searching along the Magdalena River stumbled upon a gravesite dating back 1,500 years to a pre-Columbian civilization known as the Tolima. Among the funerary objects found there were hundreds of small 2 to 3 inch gold figurines.
Many of those looked like insects and fish. However, out of those hundreds that they found, they also found about a dozen that are eerily reminiscent of modern-day fighter jets.
Okay, so he admits that when these things were found, there were hundreds of them that were clearly representing insects and animals, and only about 10 of them that looked like jet airplanes. Now, before we get into the specifics, I would like to appeal to your sense of logic. Almost all of these little figurines are depicting fish, birds, insects, lizards, and frogs. And we can see when we look at the figurines where we know what they're trying to depict, like these frogs, for instance, we can see a huge amount of variation and clearly stylistic elements that are not found in nature. So we know that they weren't trying to be ultra realistic here, which you can further see by looking at their depictions of this man, or this cat, or this alligator. The Tolima were artists, and like most artists, they had a certain style that they brought to the subjects that they were depicting. Now, considering that all the other objects they found are animals, and considering the objects in question, like all the others, have eyes and teeth and so on, isn't it more logical to assume that these objects are probably like all the others? That
Flying
is, that
fish.
they are also depicting some kind of animal in a stylized way? Ah, but wait, Ancient Aliens has a false dilemma for us.
And they have nothing in common.
You guys have seen this before, right? Have you seen this before, Shiz?
No.
Like, what do you think they're going to say it is?
Ancient Aliens. They said it's a jet fighter, but I'm going to say it's probably some sort of bug.
Yeah, bug over or something. Yeah. They're going to say it's a jet fighter or some kind of alien craft. Oh man. So I think T-Rex figured it out. He says, okay, so Siri, right? Siri means serious, I guess. When they made the plateaus, when they cut the top off the mountain, they used the rocks from that to build the pyramid. So boom, problem solved.
Dude,
yeah, I get you.
You're on it.
He's on top of it. T-Rex is smart. It's
because the Earth is flat.
Smart young man.
You got to build pyramids because the Earth is flat. Without the pyramids, you wouldn't have mountains.
Yeah, and see if you could just get a good push, they'll just end up there anyways. There's nothing to stop them. There you go.
With anything similar in nature.
There is not a single insect in the world which has got its wings at the bottom. Now, when you exclude the possibility that it's an insect, one of the things which remain is the fact that this is actually, yes, what it looks like, a plane.
Okay.
Remove insect, just it's a plane. Okay, got ya.
Let's see if we have this logic straight. Since no insect has these characteristics, it leaves us with only one other choice, which is an airplane. But I thought there were fish, birds, lizards, bats, and cats found too in the other 100 figurines. It would seem to me that he's kind of skipping a few options here on his way to the airplane conclusion. Let's take the most famous one, for example. This is the one that we will see later that they made a model airplane out of. The tails of all these figurines are vertical, which would make me think of fish, which also have vertical tails. One fish that the Tolima would have been familiar with is the suckermouth catfish. This might explain the round head and the big eyes, and even the small protrusions on the front of the fins. You can see that some varieties of this species of catfish have small protrusions on the front of its fins as well. When you look at the other gold figurines, you can see that not only were fish a common subject, but many different species of fish were represented. Because of the number and placement of the fins, fish are proposed for some of the other figurines as well. So when he says that no insect has its wings on the bottom, so it must be an airplane, I can only see that as deceptive, considering the placement and angle of the fins are perfectly accounted for in many fish species that were available and important to the Tolima culture. In other words, airplanes don't have a monopoly on being aerodynamic. To prove one of these figurines was aerodynamic, which according to Ancient Aliens proved it was a plane, they built a model of it.
Any comments, Shiz?
Yeah, I'm going to build myself a golden snitch and see if it flies.
Yes,
know, right?
It will
Harry
if you
Potter.
build it. They will come. Maybe 2 or 3 times. But I had heard of flying fish. I'd never actually seen them until I worked on a ship, and we were going through, I think it was the Gulf of Mexico, around the Gulf of Mexico, and I'm on watch, and I'm standing on the deck, and all of a sudden I hear this, and I hear these noises like all around, and I break out the flashlight, and all these flying fish are flying along and just sort of skimming the waves, and they would like dodge in and out, and then they would land on the deck. Next morning, there's like 20 or 30 dead fish laying all over the deck. And I mean, this wasn't a small ship, but I had never seen flying fish before. And I can only imagine that, hey, those could be flying fish, but I like the catfish ones too. I mean,
Here's what they say about it.
Perfect. It flew
It
perfectly.
was rather simple because we don't need to put much parts to this shape because this shape is perfect. Everything was already done by the native people 2,000 years ago.
They did not add an inch or remove an inch. They just essentially blew the little thing into a larger size. I mean, this is sensational.
No, they
That's
didn't
usually
add an
how it
inch
works.
or remove an inch, unless you count things like totally removing the big curls on the front of the wings, which would have rendered the model totally useless for flying. They also added curvature to the wings. They added flaps, a landing gear, and one more little thing, a propeller and an engine. Finally, I want to appeal to your
You don't
sense
need
of
those.
logic on the following point. Consider that all we know about this culture reveals them to be simple farmers, fishermen, and artisans, people that lived off the land. And considering that there is nothing in the extensive amount of archaeological material from this culture that would suggest knowledge about planes landing and taking off all the time, is it logical to assume that aliens landing and taking off in their backyards made so little impression on them that they only devote 10 of the hundreds of figurines to it and only in one tomb? Or is it
I think, oh yeah, them aliens. They come here all the time. It's, hey guys, you're back.
yeah, I mean, they're here all the time. I mean, let's not talk about
They
like
make a mess and
this
they just
guy being
leave.
a world famous fisherman that could catch anything.
Right. They eat everything and just make a mess and leave.
Bastards.
We kind of don't like them. they're kind of jerks.
Why don't they
More
just go on their
logical-
own side of the tracks?
Why do they come here and bother us? We're simple farmers.
Damn city folk always coming messing shit up.
They show off their big planes. It's like, okay, fine. We'll learn how to fly one day.
Ooh, you have big planes. Ooh, look at you.
Rock and
to
roll.
assume that just like the other hundreds of figurines with eyes and teeth and fins, that they are highly stylized animals, like fish, that they knew about and relied upon in their daily lives? I think even a die-hard ancient astronaut theorist would have to admit that logic is not on their side on this one.
Has it been yet?
One of those figurines looked like an alien, but it was not the ones they thought did.
Egyptian
Are
light
these
bulb.
carvings on a wall at the Dendera Temple complex in Egypt? To some, the strange designs look eerily similar to objects very much in use today.
In Egypt, there is this underground crypt at Dendera that was always secret, and only the high priests had access to that crypt. It's very hot in there, very narrow, low ceiling, and on
hot.
the walls you have these
So
reliefs
narrow.
of what looks like ancient light bulbs.
Penises.
Because we have to question one thing: how did the ancient Egyptians light the inside of their tombs?
So they had no. I disagree. Those look like giant, like phalluses, all veiny and everything. Maybe it was the pleasure dome. They said it was all hot and sweaty in there. You know.
Or maybe it was like the hot dog stand. They had the home of the foot long hot dog.
Home of the foot long hot dog.
That's just mustard. That's just mustard on top of it.
The Egyptian light bulb theory. Let's see what we can figure out about it. Let's start by listening to some of the reasons that ancient
hard to
astronaut
unsee it
theorists
now,
believe
isn't
it's
it?
true.
According to most mainstream archaeologists, torches were used by the ancient Egyptians to light the pitch-black chambers of tombs and temples. Yet nowhere on the ceilings is there even the slightest evidence of soot or smoke residue.
It's hard to know why they're saying this because there is black soot in almost every Egyptian temple and tomb. In fact, a recent ceiling cleaning conducted at the Temple of Hathor, which is the same temple where the so-called light bulb relief is found, they uncovered a brightly colored ancient ceiling painting that had never before been noticed. What was covering it up, you ask? I will quote them directly. They said that the ceiling was covered with, quote, hundreds of years of black soot. That's kind of funny, you have to admit.
Also, there isn't enough oxygen inside those tombs with which to support or feed a flame of a torch. I was once inside the king's
So how would a
chamber
human
inside
survive
the
in there?
Pyramid of Giza.
Yeah, that's a thought, isn't it?
Right. Can't breathe.
Well, maybe they had
Oh, they
ancient
weren't
fans.
humans. They
Had
weren't
ancient
humans.
fans, electric fans too.
Yeah. I'm sure
Air
he'll explain it
conditioning.
somehow.
Air conditioning.
And somebody turned off the lights, and immediately we were in pitch darkness. And I said, no problem. I'll just take out my lighter from my satchel, and I turn on the lighter, and it didn't work.
I don't know about
You're out of fluid, man. You're out of fluid.
So how was he breathing? It wouldn't
He's like,
work
"No
because there was
problem.
not
I will
enough
save us.
air.
I will save us. Some people have
with a lighter.
Some
I don't
people have
know.
called him. Let's see. Hold on. What does it say? Some people have called him a hybrid between Carl Sagan and Indiana Jones. So I guess he was being Indiana Jones right there. And he, no problem. I keep my lighter. Oh no, it does not work. What do we do? Well, how are we breathing? It doesn't make any sense. Aliens.
his specific Zippo, but there are plenty of documented explorations of the pyramid and other tombs in the early part of the 20th century which used torches to light the pyramids. Archaeologist and pyramid expert John Romer was once asked a similar question by someone on a television show. This was his response. Quote, "As for the soot, there is soot in the Great Pyramid from the 19th century travelers, but most of it has been washed off. Most of the pyramids, of course, were built in sunlight, so lighting the interior would only have been a problem after the roof went on. They would have used lamps with salt in the oil so the flame burns very pure," end quote. Romer isn't just guessing about the olive oil lamps. These lamps were depicted in Egyptian reliefs, and there are even receipts for orders of their wicks and other such evidence. Another thing to consider is that, as far as tombs go, they weren't expected to be lit. In fact, if all went well, robbers would not be able to find a way in, and the tomb would never see the light of day ever again. That was the plan. And if it weren't for 19th century explorers and dynamite, that plan might have worked too. But when we're talking about temples, like at Dendera, the false dilemma of not enough oxygen simply doesn't work. The temple is much more open. The oxygen levels are plentiful. They obviously used fire to light it, if for no other reason than because of the hundreds of years of black soot on the ceiling. Okay, so the false dilemmas have been addressed, but we're still left to explain what this relief is depicting. Let's first hear what Ancient Aliens has to say about the mainstream interpretations of this relief.
Egyptologists' explanation of this, and they have to have some explanation. There's got to be one. It has to be pretty mundane. It can't be that it's an electrical device. Their explanation is that it is a lotus flower. And what appears to be a bulb around is the aroma of the lotus flower. And so it's just a very odd depiction of a flower.
That is a terrible representation of the mainstream view of this relief. It's Ancient Aliens using a straw man argument to make their argument look superior. This relief is not so mystical if you have a little understanding of Egyptian art and religious symbols. This is a variant depiction of the creation of the world in Egyptian mythology. The Egyptians believed that before anything else existed, there was a vast primordial sea of nothingness. They believed that the first thing to emerge from this sea was a lotus flower. This is probably because the lotus closes at night and sinks underwater. In the morning, it reemerges and blooms again. It was believed that the lotus flower then gave birth to the first god, who was often associated with the sun. This relief was done after the god Atum was merged with the sun god Ra, and thus became Atum-Re. Atum, the god who created everything else after this point, is actually represented by a snake. And yes, it is a snake in these reliefs, not light bulb filaments. You can actually see the eyes and other elements of a snake if you look closely. This is pretty standard Egyptian mythology, that the lotus flower came forth first, and then the first god Atum, who was represented by a snake. Well, what about this bubble surrounding it? I will quote an expert directly on this point. Quote, "Despite the variety of deities, the Egyptians conceived the origin of the world as singular. Only one god, Atum, was responsible for the emergence of the universe as a bubble of air in the vast, limitless, inert ocean and everlasting darkness of the undifferentiated primordial waters, none, that existed before creation. In other words, the universe came forth from the lotus in a bubble of air." The other elements of this picture back this interpretation up. The universal bubble is here being supported or raised up by the goddess Nun. Nun is the primordial waters, and technically it is she that raises up the lotus, Atum, and everything else. This pose of outstretched hands is one of the more common motifs for Nun, and she raises and supports the universe from nothingness. In some versions of the story, the sun god represented in these scenes is Khepri, who is represented as a scarab beetle. Atum and Kefri sort of traded
There's a
off
fake over
being
there.
aspects of Ra in Egyptian mythology. So in essence, in more common versions of this scene, you have Nun, the primordial waters, lifting up the solar barge of Ra for its first journey across the sky. And this explains why the exact same poses are seen in this creation scene at Dendera. They are also depicting Nun raising up the universe out of her waters. This idea is very, very common. You can see other images of Ra emerging from the primordial lotus as well. The idea that the ancient Egyptians used electricity is something that is not even hinted at anywhere in the Egyptian records. And if you believe ancient aliens, they were not just using electricity, but vacuum tubes, which requires high amounts of electricity as well as rarefied gases like argon. And if this was the case, we should expect to find some mention of this somewhere. But ancient aliens has an answer for why we do not.
But if the ancient Egyptians had used some kind of electric light to illuminate their passageways, why does the visual evidence exist only in the temple at Dendera?
In Egypt, you had different areas of specialty, and Dendera was the area where the knowledge of the light-giving source was kept. And this secret knowledge was kept by the high priests. They're the only ones who were privy to this type of information, because Dendera was the special place where this specific knowledge was guarded and kept.
Right.
Okay, you gotta stop right there, because
Yeah, that's gonna be where we're gonna cut it off. We'll cut off right there, and we're gonna pick back up at that wonderful moment. where it
want
was,
some none, want some none, can't get none. Oh man. Why are they talking about nuns, ancient aliens?
I feel like he was making it up on the spot. Like it's like he's like, oh shit, I didn't see this one coming. Because it's special.
I'm telling you that the blue sky is only blue because an alien farted.
Squirrel. It's like, I gotta go.
Amazing. That was so good.
Well, hey guys,
Somebody clip that.
Everybody,
Right.
hit the like button. Show some love to this man right over here. And make sure that you're subscribed to that lovely young lady right there. 'Cause she's
Absolutely.
awesome.
And Shizzy.
And
And
I'm
Shizzy,
okay. You can
absolutely.
come and check me out anytime.
Yeah. Well, you can check us all out on part 2 of this wonderful program. We've all committed to it. We're gonna do it. And this has been wonderful and a lot of fun. And thank you guys both for coming on last minute and joining me, because you guys really made this much better. Absolutely.
Thank you for having me. I really had fun.
You got it. And anytime. Anything coming up you guys want to mention while you're here? Go. This is the part where we grift.
Go ahead, Katelyn.
Right now I'm on a mini hiatus. I got to figure out my whole work schedule and life situation. But give me about a week and I will hopefully have something new coming towards you.
All right.
Well, and tomorrow you can check out part 2 of the John Wayne Todd tapes. I'll be firing that off. I believe I got that going on at 8:30. Could be 8, something like that. It's in the link. Just check it out. It'll be tomorrow. It'll be one of the shorter ones. Depends on how many times I stop and comment on how foolish this guy is. But nothing like the alien stuff here. But it's an interesting listen of, and you can always catch up on part 1. It's a short stream. I don't think it's any longer than like an hour. The part 1 is the introduction to it. It might be 2 hours introduction, and then the first part of the tapes. And then I'll be covering part 2 tomorrow, and it's going to be like an 13 parts. There'll be 13 parts to that whole piece. So it'll be good. It'll be well worth listening to what this guy has to say, whether you're a believer or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Tomorrow night, my show, Repairing History, we will be looking at we're going to answer the question, or try to answer the question: was slavery racist? And we're going to look at the history of slavery, and we're going to be hearing a lot from Thomas Sowell. That's the work of Thomas Sowell that show is based upon, and others like him. But Thomas Sowell's our feature there. So we're going to be listening to a lot of Thomas Sowell tomorrow night, a lot of readings from his book, and we're going to be exploring this topic all the way back. And then actually, thanks to a friend of mine pointing something out, we're actually going to take a look forward too, and kind of ask questions about it in modern day. Because the truth is, it's like slavery never really stopped. Now, the kind of slavery we have here did, but slavery around the world continues. So we're going to use that as part of the formula, too, to kind of answer this question. So that's Repairing History tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here tonight. I appreciate all of you. And for my co-hosts tonight, Katelyn Comments and ShizzyWhizNut, hey, y'all have a great evening and keep on winning.
Go.
Bye.